I'd like to call this Saline City Council meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And there are copies of the agenda on the back table, along with hearing devices if they are needed. Members present in the dais this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, council members Dillon, Delorco, and Kraus. We have 3 members participating remotely. And again, when I call on you, you'll need to state your geographic location. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
Gearbaugh, Saline, Michigan.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Seal.
Here, Saline, Michigan.
Councilmember Kamara-Sulak.
Here, Oak Brook Court, Saline, Michigan.
Excellent. Okay, quorum is present. And from city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Treasurer Bennett, Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Green, City Engineer Fordyce, Police Chief Hart, and Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. I would note for the public's benefit that the Fairdean development has been removed from tonight's agenda, but will reappear at a future meeting. And actually, I will move to approve the agenda as amended. I want to flip the 2 presentations. So we'll begin with our special presentation and then transition to a report on biosolids. So moved by Marl to approve the agenda as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. There are no absences, so we'll transition to citizen comments. And I would note for the public benefit that we are unable to accept comments via Zoom, but you may email your comments to the city clerk, or of course, you are now permitted to attend council meetings in person. Clerk Royal, I would also note in the event that you did not see the email that Margaret and Jim Kuklinski did respond, and they would like their email that was sent to me earlier today read as part of the public record.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Again, following the previously established protocol, we'll begin with those in attendance this evening, in the room, excuse me. So under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Is there anyone in council chambers who would like to speak tonight to any issue that's an enumerated item on our agenda? Please. Please come to the mic. Yep.
Yes, microphone. Yeah, I was come here tonight because I wanted to speak in support of closing South Ann Arbor Street. Can I take my mask off?
Please.
All right, thank you. So yes, South Ann Arbor Street. In fact, I want to go a step farther and say South Ann Arbor Street should be completely and permanently pedestrianized. I'm picturing a street being transformed into a public square with chairs, benches, trees, planters, public Wi-Fi, a place where people can gather, eat, celebrate, live their life, protest injustice, etc. Until that day happens, let's return to what we know worked last year. Closing off the street created a public gathering space that Saline really doesn't have in the center of town. Saline's most famous landmark is actually a heavily trafficked intersection. I'm talking 4 corners. The parks tend to be more on the edge of town. Lost my place, sorry. I understand this is a complicated issue and there's a lot of competing interests here, but rather than maintain the status quo, this is where the city can step up and show leadership. If a citizen can't park in front of a business they like to patronize, parking is merely a block away, a couple-minute walk. If they have to be detoured to commute to their jobs, it's a couple minutes extra out of their day. If traffic gets detoured into other streets, we can add in traffic calming measures in order to make it more palatable to the residents. These are all tiny adjustments that we could live with that I would think make this place a better place to live. I think of it as not losing a street, but rather gaining a public square. And this is something we can do now, and just remember, if we don't do it, other cities are actually doing this. So in order to be competitive, I say close it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Much appreciated. Are there any additional comments from those in the audience this evening?
Good evening. My name is Paul Garagosian. I'm the owner, proprietor of Brecken Grill, if you do not know this. 19 years we've been on that corner, and some of the best years we've had were because of outside seating. 75% of our business last year, from when we reopened June 16th until the Umbrella Square closed, was outside, 75% of it. I have 10 employees right now. Last summer I had 20 employees. So I doubled my staff when I needed that outdoor space. Other businesses, including the other restaurants and retail, have invested into their stores and their storefronts to make this a viable space. I'm not talking from here, I'm talking from here tonight. Because to me, the most important thing to me is having a town that my 4 children can grow up in, that they're proud of, and that they know that the city itself supports its downtown. Okay, I know that as a collective group, City Council supports downtown businesses and all their businesses within their industrial parks. I just think that as far as a draw to our city, we have an opportunity to create something different that we might not have in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, to change our image as our city, to draw people from other cities into our city, to live, to dine, to shop, to play. I think it's one of the best things that the city of Saline can do in the past 18 months. Okay. Myself, I don't know if I would have survived last year as a business without having Umbrella Square. I know my neighboring businesses, some of them are supportive of it, some of them are not. We're not all going to win in this situation, I understand that. But I do know that as a collective group, I think it's best for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Additional comments from those in the audience this evening?
I'm Martin Flint, own Excalibur Barbershop for 52 years. I agree with Paul, and I think that shutting down the street definitely helps them. It definitely hurts me. I'd like to have maybe a survey done for a couple months and see how well the restaurants do for a couple months, and then if it keeps on being good, then go ahead and have it closed down for a little bit longer period of time. But I'd also like to have it so that the street is closed down like it was last year, so people can drive up in front of my shop and then let off the handicapped people or some of the older people that can't walk across the street to the parking lot. And but I'd like to help out the restaurants, too, as far as that goes. But my business, it really does impact my business. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Any additional comments from those in the audience? Wally?
Yeah, Wally McNeil from Max and a resident of Saline. I'm going to let Holly do the presentation, but I did bring financial information month to month that's official, so if anybody on City Council had any specific questions, I'd be more than happy to share it and read it to you. So, all right?
Very good. Hang tight, Wally. Thank you. Any additional comments from those in the audience?
Mary Hess. I speak as far as that this is a public street, and I have concerns as far as the liability that should someone get hit with a truck on Old Creek because the traffic has been diverted, that the council be saved harmless by an attorney's opinion. Also, that paper, being it's a public street that may be closed, that there be paper, not glass, used outside because of the breakage and the safe hazard of animals' paws or people with flip-flops. I guess I'm concerned, how much parking is this going to take off US 12? I noticed that there's many signs that says no parking here now for pickup. So it's not only the street being closed, but now are we going to continue the pickup as far as off US 12? I think I'm a little bit concerned is that Uptown was only for Uptown. Saline is about 4.5 square miles, and there's a lot of businesses. And many of the restaurants have all hurt. Beauty shops, everyone did. And I'm sure they got the paperwork to show for it. But I think that I'm disappointed that we are definitely being selective in who we're helping as far as restaurants. There are other restaurants that are not even being addressed with their concern. Thank you.
Any additional comments from those in the audience? Couple more?
Good evening. Phil Tolliver, Smokehouse 52. Just to kind of follow up on what Paul had said, is that really just, it comes down to percentage-wise, last year outdoor seating sales accounted for any given week on average 85% of my weekly sales. So without that, if I wouldn't have had that, I would be closed. Without it, again, this year, I will be closing my doors. There's no doubt about it. So I'm unique in that I'm the only restaurant downtown that does not naturally have an outdoor seating area. So we've been working with the city for the back alley for some type of small outdoor seating and still working through that process. But to have the closed street and have that amount of seating, that's what keeps us going. So I currently have 14 employees, most of which are from Saline. With that outdoor seating area, we would add approximately 10 to 12 more people for great paying jobs and keep them going. So, but really, truly, without that outdoor seating, Smokehouse will not exist. And that's really as simple as it is, and the painful truth. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Schneider. I live in downtown Saline, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself, not for Saline Main Street. I know when we consider closing the street that safety has been an issue, but I would urge you to think that Saline's Finest can handle this and that Chief Hart will take care of traffic calming. There is no guarantee that a child wouldn't be hit on Old Creek today. There is no, I mean, you just can't guarantee it. So I don't know that diverting traffic off of South Ann Arbor Street is going to create a traffic jam on Old Creek. One of the things I like to point out about this proposal is that a majority of the downtown businesses support it. And I have been around long enough to see that not happen very often. Even the retailers, it wasn't just the restaurants that supported the last proposal, it was the retailers and the service businesses too. Other communities are doing this, and I know, speaking for myself, my mother's not going to eat inside a restaurant this summer. So she's going to go to Ann Arbor or Milan or Dexter or Ypsilanti to eat, other than Saline, and that's going to hurt our businesses and hurt our downtown. I would also encourage you to think about doing the closure permanently, not just for the weekends, and not closing parking lots. Closing parking lots is like cutting off your nose to spite your face. It takes away from places that people can park to support our businesses. If you only do the closure on the weekend, that creates extra work for businesses who have been needlessly harmed during this pandemic. The restaurants are already struggling. If you have to make them move the furniture twice a week, it doesn't work. And it didn't work last summer when it rained every weekend. We need those streets to be open all the time so people can use them whenever the sun is out. I think this is a great opportunity for the City of Saline to show some leadership and so show some support for the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any additional comments from those present this evening? Okay, then we're going to transition to those who provided written communique to the city clerk, and I will preface by saying there are several. Similar to the protocols that were used by those who speak in person, these written comments will be limited to 3 minutes. I will be timing them from the list or from the litany of inquiries and comments that we received. I suspect a few of them will run a little bit over 3 minutes, but I know the clerk will try her best to get as much in that 3 minute time frame as possible. So Clerk Royal, whenever you're ready, you may begin, and if you please state the individual's name and then read their message, and if we reach the 3 minute threshold, I will let you know.
Yes, sir. The first one is from Mary Ellen Mulcrone, from Library Director, and she says, this year, National Library Week helps to remind everyone that libraries extend far beyond the building walls and that all are welcome to use the many services provided by the library. As the American Library Association states, during the pandemic, libraries have been going above and beyond to adapt to our changing world by expanding their resources and continuing to meet the needs of their users. Whether people visit in person or virtually, libraries offer opportunities for everyone to explore new worlds and become their best selves through access to technology, multimedia content, and educational programs. Over the past year, Saline District Library has greatly increased access to digital resources through the library website, salinelibrary.org, while continuing to make available new and older print and audiovisual materials for checkout from the library. The library building is open 7 days a week, and the library website is open 24/7. While gatherings and occupancy in the building continue to be limited, library staff have found innovative ways to offer programs via Facebook and other outlets. Story times, book discussions, trivia games, and other events are available online. Storytime kits, team subscription boxes, and craft kits for all ages can be picked up in the building. Just check the website for detail. Saline District Library staff look forward to greeting everyone at the library. The next one is from an email from Liz Hilgren, and she states, I would like to say that I did not use this outside eating option, and I still don't, simply because my mom lives with me and I am just too paranoid. But we are vaccinated this week, and I can tell you, we want to go out to eat, we want to shop. I am for the closure. I think we should always do it for the outside eating season. We could do so many fun things with it. If the problem is that traffic shifts and people don't like more traffic on their street, well, I will offer no sympathy, because I live in North Ann Arbor, and we get way too much traffic on Ann Arbor Street. I don't think it is a bad thing to spread it out a bit. It's just for the season. It was ugly. If we do it again, we should work harder at making it not look like road construction. Maybe we could have a contest to decorate, or give a decorating some free press if they make it look good. Don mentioned the traffic barriers were expensive. We should just buy them and always use them for this, or take the ones for the mulch at DPW. I don't think the mulch will escape. If it does, it won't get far. She also mentioned it hurt some businesses. I think COVID hurt the businesses. There are a million ways to address some of that. Once you get more people out and up there, the businesses may need to increase the hours they are open. Someone needs to serve a nice brunch during the farmer's market. Maybe the business could rotate who does it. Would do it every week. Someone needs to do some kind of food truck thing down there every once in a while. Maybe once a month or once a season. We could invite a bunch of them and have a street party. Maybe we need to have the farmer's market stay open until 3. Make Saturday the day to go to Saline and spend it uptown. Our farmer's market is really one of the best. I think it is better than Ann Arbor's. But the thing Ann Arbor Farmer's Market has is that once you are there, you find a place to park and pay to park and fight the crowd. You can do some shopping and eat lunch. We can have that and do better. You asked for some ideas for space. A euchre tournament, bingo, always fun and always underrated. Make it a grandparents and grandkids date night. Maybe the new candy store could sell fun candy. Grandparents are the only people that really understand people need to eat too much candy. Have a history lesson. Have some music and have some people tell stories about the town, like the Moth Story Hour. Teach me about the buildings that I am seeing. Maybe tell me about Dan's. Who has owned it? What has been in the building? Maybe you could do it like the cemetery tour, which is great. Teach me to cook something. One of those restaurants could host a thing on how to make a thing. Get some grills out there and have some contest for best ribs or brats.
Thank you, Clerk Royal. We've reached the 3 minutes. So if you'd like to transition to the next comment.
There was a lot left of that one. I'm sorry. This is an email from Jean Wilson, and she says, hi, I'm just letting you know I totally support the outdoor dining on the street during COVID. Once COVID is once COVID is really not an issue, then I can see changing again. I think the good of the whole should outweigh the issues of a few. Perhaps something special, promotion, etc., by the city could help the couple of businesses negatively impacted. Our food folks have taken the worst hit of all during COVID. They're barely in business as it is right now. I think it is up to us to be flexible and to help them out. I strongly support closing that one block for a few months to help make it happen. The next email is from Katie Mazza. Shutting down Ann Arbor Saline Road is a very, very bad idea. Every time they shut this down, it benefits very few businesses, but hurts the other businesses. Also, a huge concern is that it puts way too much traffic into side streets that can't handle it. And these streets are in family neighborhoods, so there are kids that are now not getting bused to school, but have to cross these even busier side streets to get to school. There are kids playing in the neighborhood and riding their bikes, and we should think more about their safety than about a business not having enough seating. The intersection at Michigan Ave and Oak Creek takes the biggest hit, and we already have too many accidents there, including children. It's ridiculous to even think about doing this option again, let alone long-term. The next one is an email from Mary Robertson. It says, I am asking to encourage City Council to once again close down South Ann Arbor Street this summer. The impact on the community that it had last summer was immense. My husband and I ate there several times a week, not only to enjoy the dining, but to support our local restaurants who have suffered so in these COVID times. We live in a community that encourages camaraderie and family living, and this venue has been so representative of that. I realize that not everyone is in favor of this. However, we can't satisfy everyone, and I believe there are many more positive than negative outcomes. Please voice my support for the closing of South Ann Arbor Street. The next one is from Cindy McNeil. It states, I am respectfully expressing my thoughts on the closure of South Ann Arbor Road that you are currently evaluating. I recently reached out through email and Facebook to the public asking for their support and requesting they fill out the survey in support of the closure. I expressed my support to City Council members in an email I sent last week. At this time, I would request City Council include and consider the following thoughts and address them at the City Council meeting April 5th, 2021. I know the pandemic has impacted all of us, residents and businesses. Everyone is hoping for things to go back to normal. I believe expanding restaurant seating into the street with community events and entertainment offers Saline businesses and residents hope for a brighter future. It is my understanding that last year, the City of Saline created Saline's COVID-19 Recovery Task Force to evaluate ways to support the community and business recovery needs. With this part of CRTF, tasks were to evaluate the 2020 Ann Arbor Saline Road closure and look at ways to support small business economic recovery during 2021. In the last City Council meeting, CRTF recommended to Saline City Council that Saline Ann Arbor Street be utilized by closing it from May to October to offer economic recovery opportunities for all downtown businesses because it posed minimal, if any, negative impact. Now is the time your Saline restaurants and stores need City Council support. Every day counts. Communities all over the state and country are fighting for survival, and we need to fight for Saline. I believe now is the time to build back together. The downtown small businesses are part of the infrastructure of the city, and closing South Ann Arbor Street for alfresco dining, entertainment, shopping is an investment in rebuilding this infrastructure. The pandemic has been hard on all of us. Family, friends, and associates has suffered sickness and loss, the magnitude of which no one saw coming a year ago. Over this past 13 months, businesses of all type and sizes have been economically devastated. Some businesses have closed. Some will close. Those left are fighting every day to survive. There is hope as the COVID-19 vaccinations roll out. We must remember that the path back to life as we knew it will be a long journey, and we are just beginning. There is no magic switch to reset our lives and our economic well-being. Months of losses must be rebuilt over time, and for Saline small business recovery will take years. I believe Saline is a great place to live, work, and play. This did not happen overnight. I moved to Saline in 1992 during a time when no one shopped downtown Saline. Buildings were run down, storefronts empty, residents drove out of town for shopping and dining. In 1996, my husband and I opened Max. We took a chance then, have worked hard over the past 24 years to support the Saline community, and are struggling now to survive.
Clerk Royal, I'm sorry, we've reached the 3 minutes.
Okay.
I'd like to transition to the next one.
The next one is from Frank Dadon and Nicholas Korpokulis. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that one. It says, "Dear council members, this is in regards to the council meeting on Monday, April 5th. We, the Saline Inn, are asking you to be mindful and respectful with your decision regarding the closure of the streets for dining. We understand the need. However, we object to full-time closure and would be more supportive of a part-time closure Friday through evening through Sunday night. We understand the downtown businesses are in favor of Thursday to Sunday. However, they can adjust their days of operation as they are asking everyone else to adapt to their needs. This deeply affects our business and puts us at a disadvantage with them having an entertainment venue with dining. To this date, there has been mention of a plan for recovery and supporting all businesses in the city, but we have not seen or heard of any strategy plan for all to succeed. We asked for help and were even denied our taxable value of the building to remain at a 2020 level. Thank you for your time." The next two are regarding the public hearing that will actually be on the next meeting, but they submitted them for this meeting. This one is from Kirk McCrea and Lucen Jen Say McCrea. We refer to your letter notice of public hearing from your office dated 3/22/21 regarding the above matter and notice of public hearing fixed for 4/5/21. We hereby place on record our objections for our property to be included as part of the proposed special assessment district on the same grounds as per our earlier letter when the same subject matter came before the city council during the public hearing of the proposed special assessment district held on 11/9/2020 last year. Once again, we object for our property to be included as part of the proposed Saline special assessment district because there is a document/map attached to the city engineer's memorandum dated 7/14/2020, which shows that our property will not be contributing flow to the proposed catch basin. That is the subject matter of the proposed improvement. See the map attached to the city engineer's memorandum. Ergo, we would derive no special benefit that warrants a portion of the special assessment against our property. Even if it could be said that our property would derive some general benefit from the proposed drain, that is not sufficient grounds for levying a special assessment against our property on established principles. There is no evidence that our property market value will be increased as a unique, direct, measurable result of the public improvement for which the special assessment is being leveraged. Furthermore, there is already an existing public sewer drain located close to the boundary line at the furthest part of our backyard on the property of 500 Markville Drive. Furthermore, 500 Markville Drive is also a property that is not included in the list of properties against which the special assessment is being proposed. Please ensure that our letter herein and its attachments are read out at the public hearing and formally placed on the record. And then the last one I've received is from Margaret Kolasinski, and it says, "Dear City Council members, if the resolution to add a drain on Eastlick Drive passes, it will finally end many years of frustration and increasingly heavy flooding in our backyard. The easement and drainage ditch between the lots on Markville and Eastlick originally carried excess water to the drain behind 492 Markville. Over time, a number of neighbors filled in the easement ditch, damming the flow. Since our yard is the lowest, we were most adversely affected. Last year, the water level in the back reached our foundation. We asked the city to intervene, and a few times they did, once causing Mr. Sherman to redig the ditch. A Markville resident mounded dirt in the ditch and planted trees, which are now large. Most recently, 2 years ago, our next door neighbors added a large amount of dirt to fill in the ditch and put a mound near the edge of the property, blocking all water flows to the existing drain. Then they added a French drain, routing water to the front yard and down our sidewalk and driveway. When Mr. Fordyce came out in June 2020 at our request, he proposed that the city put in a new drain rather than trying to clear the path to the original drain. Many of the neighbors blocking our access to the drain have solved their problem by aggravating ours. We did not realize that a new drain would cause an assessment which would be subject partly to these neighbors' approval. When our backyard floods, the electrical, telephone, and cable boxes are under standing water. Our options are quite limited. We are very hopeful that the city will approve the new drain. That's all I have.
That's all you have? Okay. One last opportunity. Is there any additional public comments? Well, let me say, to try and add some levity to this, well, first of all, we thank everybody for their comments. I've been attending or observing council meetings for nearly 20 years, and I think that's the most public comment we received since we decided to rent the rec center to the nudists after hours. So, but it's all good. We appreciate your remarks this evening. If there is nothing further, then we're going to transition to the two presentations this evening that are on the agenda. And first up is a special presentation. Matthew Schneider, do you know why you're here tonight?
I have an idea.
Okay. Why don't you come forward? And I regret to hear of your little accident. My apologies.
Well, I slipped and fell in City Hall, so my attorneys will...
Oh, great. Well, maybe I should rethink this special presentation. But in all seriousness, I think most of you know that Matthew Schneider just completed 2.5, 3 years as U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. And that is a big job. It's an important job. And I feel it's incumbent upon me as mayor to take time to recognize Salinians who do extraordinary things, not only for our community, but for the region and for the state. And so it is one of the privileges that I have as mayor that I am able to present proclamations and keys to whomever I please. And over the course of my tenure, which is now in year 9, I've given away maybe one a year. Wally and Cindy are recipients of one when they celebrated their 20th anniversary. Joy Ely received one. Don Shelton, when he retired from the bench, received one. The Torminos, when they retired, received one. So it's a very exclusive group of Salinians. But in recognition of Matthew's accomplishments, which are many, I'm going to read this tribute. I deemed it appropriate to award him a key to the city. And I want to thank his family. His daughter and son, Christian and Ava, are here, along with his wife, Rebecca, who in kind of a clandestine way assisted me with this. So without her support, this would not have been possible. So thank you, Rebecca. So City of Saline, Michigan, in recognition of Matthew J. Schneider. Whereas Matthew J. Schneider has served the state of Michigan with great distinction as a U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District, during which he attained numerous individual and office-wide accomplishments that left the district in a better place. And whereas Mr. Schneider's professional achievements, include serving as Chief Deputy Attorney General for the state of Michigan, Chief Legal Counsel for the state of Michigan, for the Attorney General, Chief of Staff and General Counsel for the Michigan Supreme Court, an Assistant U.S. Attorney, and Senior Advisor and Assistant General Counsel in the White House Budget Office. And whereas Mr. Schneider's accomplishments, along with his colleagues, include securing the largest civil settlement in American history regarding an unlawful drug diversion into a major healthcare system, the investigation and charges of 6 men conspiring to kidnap Governor Whitmer, and the largest investigation and prosecution of corrupt auto executives. And whereas Mr. Schneider, a graduate of University of Michigan Law School, Michigan State University James Madison College, has remained rooted in the Saline community by emceeing our annual Oktoberfest event, wearing his beloved lederhosen, and holding a stein while leading attendees in German beer drinking songs. Whereas Mr. Schneider's personal and professional successes have had a positive impact on the city of Saline, and we are proud to call him a Salinian. Now, therefore, I, Brian D. Morrow, Mayor of the City of Saline, on behalf of Saline City Council and the citizens of Saline, do hereby thank Matthew J. Schneider for his dedicated service to Saline, and to hereby present him a key to the city with sincerest appreciations and gratitude. And I hereby set my hand and seal to this document on the 2nd day of April 2021. Matthew, congratulations.
Thank you, Brian. This is such an incredible honor. I'm appreciative not only to my family, Rebecca, Ava, and Christian, but my friends right up here on the city council and in the city. And thank you so much, Brian. I can tell you that I think I've accomplished a lot in my life. A lot of that I thought I would actually accomplish, but I never thought that I would get the key to the city. This is like
truly a lifetime pinnacle for me, and I really mean that. And my mother, who taught at Houghton School, and my father, who worked on Bennett Street, I can tell you they're pretty I wouldn't say outraged, they're pretty shocked themselves. They're pretty amazed by it, and I've really made them proud, and I'm just so pleased to be a part of Saline, and I will continue to wear lederhosen at Oktoberfest for decades to come. Thank you so much.
How about one of those German toasts?
Thank you. Sure, I think you need some help with that. Thank you very much.
You good there, Matthew? Need a hand?
Thank you so much.
Yep, it's our pleasure. Rebecca, thanks again. Christian, Ava, appreciate you being here. Okay, friends, we're going to transition now to the second presentation of the evening, which is a biosolids report. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to introduce our guests and frame this issue before they begin the presentation?
Certainly. So we have two representatives from Tetra Tech who will be presenting on the biosolids study that is now completed. I believe Council had directed Tetra Tech to perform the study in 2020. The results and the recommendations of those are outlined in the presentation that follows. I'm not sure, I'm double checking that we do have both of those representatives here. Yes, Brian Rubel and Brent Bode. Brian, would you like to kick it off? Do we need to assign him?
It needs to be unmuted.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, thank you. We've worked quite hard over the last few months to finish up the biosolids management plan. And as I recall, we brainstormed ideas that we could just keep the wastewater treatment plant progress moving while we were waiting on some funding questions and so forth. And so this was one area that we could study and get a good idea of the plan together prior to starting a major design project. And with that in mind, Brent Bode, who you have met on a couple of occasions, was the primary author of that work. And I think you'll be better served if Brent leads you through a discussion of that work tonight. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and I will be here that Brent will lead us through it.
All right, good evening. And we've got a presentation that we pulled together here, so let me pull that up here a second. As part of the recently completed siting study that was done for possible alternatives for treatment at the wastewater treatment plant with the projected flows anticipated with growth within the city, one of the things that was identified as part of that study was the need to do a biosolids management plan for also determining the alternatives for how to handle biosolids produced during the treatment process at the plant. So, as part of that, preparing to do that plan, we reviewed the historical data from the plant's flows, loadings, and conditions, the cost for the current land application program, and developed a process model to model different treatment change alternatives to the plant, switching from RBCs to activated sludge system with an aeration tank to determine what impacts that would have on the future solids productions at the plant, and all to evaluate, the projected loadings with the 20-year planning cycle for the facility. So, and then we also reviewed possible regulatory changes and contacted different landfills within the area. So, biosolids, which is kind of a fancy word for what used to be called sludge at the wastewater treatment plant, is one of the two end products that are developed during the wastewater treatment process. Raw sewage and wastewater comes into the plant. It's treated. One of those byproducts is the treated effluent water, which is then discharged to the river. The second one is the biosolids, which is the organic material that is collected and produced during the treatment process. This material is then typically disposed of, and there's typically two different means for disposal of that: land application where it is applied to agricultural fields or disposal at a landfill. Um, to be used as a reuse product and a soil additive, such as part of land application, the material needs to be a Class A or Class B criteria, which basically means material needs to be stabilized to kill off any pathogens that may remain in the biosolids after treatment. So there's with the two classifications of stabilization. Class A material can be applied in a public area. It is a product that can be sold as a fertilizer product. It takes a lot of effort to reach that Class A classification and cost, and there's limited interest in it as a commercial product for resale within the state of Michigan. The Class B is typically reached through the use of anaerobic digesters, similar to the one that is currently operation at the Saline wastewater plant, or by chemical means of stabilization. The biosolids are treated in the digester and then stored and then land applied or disposed of throughout after they've been stored for a period of time. So the current biosolids management process at the wastewater plant is the biosolids are collected from the primary clarifiers and secondary clarifiers and are pumped to the existing 50-foot diameter anaerobic digester on site. This digester was updated in 2015 with a new mixing system and boiler system for the heating and other components to the digester. The digester is heated by the boiler, and hot water and glycol are circulated through a heat exchanger to heat the biosolids to try to maintain a temperature of about 100 degrees. As part of that, at that temperature, a series of biological processes take place, and they break down the biosolids. As part of that process, methane gas is released. That gas is then collected off the digester and then used and burned in the boiler to basically maintain the heat for the system and kind of be a self-sustaining operation. As part of that breakdown and decomposition of the material, the volume of the solids is reduced. So you typically see about a 40% reduction in the solids volume from what comes into the digester to what goes out of the digester into storage, thus helping to reduce the amount of material that eventually needs to be disposed of off-site. This anaerobic digestion process then meets that Class B requirement, so the material can be land applied. It typically takes 15 to 18 days of holding the material in the digester tank for all these reactions to occur and to meet that Class B requirement. So therefore, you need a certain volume in the tank to meet that solid retention time. And then the digested material is then transferred to the two concrete storage tanks on site. There's a 550,000 gallon tank and a 280,000 gallon tank. And from there, the material is pumped out twice a year to be land applied on site. Eagle requires that wastewater plants have 180 days of storage capacity. So that's kind of what dictates those large tanks on site. So considerations. So concerns with the existing biosludge process. Because, as we've kind of identified as part of the siting study, the limited storage volume for the biosolids is stressed with the projected growth of the plant. We're expecting approximately double the flow to the plant within the next 20 years, and that's going to result in considerable increase in the biosolids on site. There's unknown future regulations involved with land application With the emergence of PFAS as a concern, land application may not be feasible in the future, and other means of disposal may need to be developed. There's also, because of PFAS and other components, landowners are more hesitant to receive land application biosolids because, due to odors or concerns with their neighbors. So as part of our biosolids management plan, the considerations we looked at were space on the existing site to maintain the biosolids process, but yet didn't want to impact any future improvements that were planned for the location. So, minimizing the footprint of any processes on site was tried to be maximized. We had a determination of how that final product is going to be used. Is it going to be used for reuse, or is it going to be deemed for disposal? And that then leads into whether or not you need to meet that Class B requirement, or if it's a raw biosolids material that is disposed of at a landfill. Looking at ways of utilizing the methane gas that is produced currently through the digester and trying to reuse that with a green approach, and then also what that final disposal method is, whether it's land application or landfill. So looking at methods of stabilization, there are basically two means. The chemical addition mean, which is typically lime is added to the solid to raise the pH of the material and then kill off any pathogens, or the anaerobic digestion operation that's currently being used. Methods of disposal, there are larger municipalities within the state utilize incineration. For smaller plants like this, it's not really a feasible option because of the high capital cost for the incinerators, the difficulty of operational management of those, and basically it's needs to be continually watched and adjusted. The permit requirements involved in incineration are quite complicated, and the unlikeliness that an incinerator would be improved within the city. So we've kind of deemed incineration as a non-likely option. Landfills, we looked at different possibilities and what the acceptance was with landfills for biosolids material, and also the availability of land application with any of the future regulatory requirements. And then also looked at methods for handling the biosolids, being dewatering and thickening. There's numerous different technologies out there that can be used for those options, and we really didn't necessarily dive into evaluating those equipment options, but just the process in general. With thickening, that step is basically taking the biosolids that are collected in the primary clarifiers and the secondary clarifiers, and before they are pumped to the digester, and trying to reduce that liquid volume a little bit by basically putting polymer into the liquid and then pressing the liquid to reduce the percent solids from the 3% solids that it's typically operating at now to probably a 6 to 8%. And by reducing that liquid volume, you are able to maximize your volume within the digester, and then also reduce the necessary storage volume downstream in the storage tanks. So the thickening option would basically result in a material that's kind of similar to a thick applesauce or a cottage cheese type product before it's pumped in the digester instead of a real liquid. The dewatering process is similar to the thickening process, but that would reduce, is typically what's done at the final step of the process before disposal, where you take the digested material and reduce it to a 22 to 25% solids dewatered cake product, which is kind of the consistency of a potting soil. So it's definitely a difference between a liquid and a solid component there. So as part of our evaluation, we kind of screened out options that really weren't feasible with the saline infrastructure and capacity. One of the things we looked at was the possibility of energy recovery from the methane gas that was produced off of the digester. Tetra Tech is currently implementing has two projects in the state where we're collecting biogas off of digesters to run generator engines, which then produce electricity to be fed back into the plant. And as part of those projects, we've kind of found that the tipping point with a payback for that energy generation is a plant that has about an average flow of 10 MGD. So the saline flow, even the projected 20-year flow, is only up to 3 MGD. So it's really not economically feasible to implement that technology now. That may change over time as the technology is refined. So we would want to keep an eye on that in the future, but right now it doesn't seem like an option. Then also kind of as I indicated with incineration, it's very labor intensive. There's very high capital costs with that, and it's a lot of difficulty with permitting. So we deem that as really as a non-feasible option. And then with the stabilization component, because the city has the existing digester infrastructure, that was a better option than the chemical stabilization component, because we'd have to add a lot of capital costs to implement lime stabilization. So the preferred stabilization approach was to go with anaerobic digestion. So with all of that, we kind of came up with 4 main alternatives. The first alternative is basically maintaining the current solids handling approach at the plant with anaerobic digestion, storage of the digested material in storage tanks on site, and then land application twice a year. The second alternative is implementing that thickening step into the process, so where the biosolids be thickened before digestion to reduce the volume, thus reducing the necessary storage downstream and reducing the cost associated with that, and then land application. Alternative C is maintaining the digestion approach that's currently working, but instead of land application of the final product, we would dewater the product and dispose of it at a landfill, thus eliminating the need for on-site sludge storage and the cost associated with constructing new tanks. And then the fourth alternative D, would be discontinuing digestion, basically converting the digester tank into a short-term storage tank and pumping from that tank to the watering equipment and then disposing the material at a landfill. This is kind of a site plan drawing of the components that would be involved as part of alternative A. To meet that 180 days of storage capacity for the digested sludge, we need to add approximately 1 million gallons of storage space on the site. So that's kind of indicated by the 2 large rectangles. A portion of the existing sludge storage tank would be expanded, and then a new 800,000 gallon tank would be constructed on the west side of the site. The existing digester would be improved, the roof would be replaced, the cover would be replaced, which was identified under previous asset management plans. And for the most part, the operation of the system would maintain the same, with the final product being land applied. Alternative B is adding that thickening step to the process. So a new thickening building would be constructed on the west side of the site with a thickener unit, polymer chemical feed for that system, and then pumps. And then because we're thickening the biosolids, we're reducing the volume that's necessary for on-site storage. So instead of needing 1 million gallons of storage, we only need 600,000 gallons of storage on site. So a new tank would be constructed for that storage. Now, and then alternative C would be utilizing the existing digester, making improvements to the tank, placing the cover, and then constructing a new biosolids dewatering building where our dewatering screw presses would be located. Here, the instead of pumping the digested sludge to the storage tanks, it would be pumped to the dewatering building, dewatered, disposed of, discharged into a dumpster, and then from the dumpsters would then be taken to the landfill for final disposal. We'd no longer need the on-site storage, so there would be no need for construction of additional tanks. The product would meet Class B requirements. This would help to reduce the volume that's coming out of the digester, but also would help to reduce odor concerns. And this option also has the smallest footprint, so it doesn't impact future improvements on the site, because we're staying to the south portion of the site and not impacting any of the future process expansion. But it also gives the city the most flexibility also in the future too, with any changes with regulations, or if landfill tipping fees increased, we have the ability to go back to land application because we still are a stabilized biosolids and we meet that Class B criteria, so it could still be land applied or landfill. And then alternative B is the dewatering process. Well, here we're taking raw biosolids and dewatering them. There's a few concerns with that approach because the biosolids haven't been through the digestion process and they're not stabilized. There's a lot greater risk for odors to be generated as part of the process. You're not getting the solids destruction and volume reduction that you originally had with the digester operation. So there's a larger amount of material that needs to be disposed of. So there's higher tipping fee costs at the landfill. And the biggest concern is likely the odor issues related to the processing of the material, and then also the hauling of the material in dumpsters through the city. So we've generated cost opinions, probable cost opinions for the four alternatives. Alternatives A and B involve considerable amount of tank construction for that volume, so that there's a lot of costs associated with that. Where alternatives C and D are very, very close to the same cost because there isn't that tank construction. Alternative C has the lowest capital cost and also has the lowest present work cost of the four alternatives. So based on that evaluation and the operational flexibility, the lowest capital cost and lowest life cycle cost, the recommended alternative is alternative C, which is the digestion, dewatering, and landfill. By continuing to use the digester, you get the beneficial use of the methane gas recovery to maintain the digester operation. You have the flexibility in the future to go between landfill and land application if needed. It minimizes construction on site to provide space for future process modifications, and it also reduces the risk of odors because you're handling the stabilized material. This here is a cutaway of a screw press unit to kind of give you a little bit of understanding of what the equipment looks like. The biosolids would be mixed with polymer to create a flock. That flock would be fed into the unit in the lower left-hand corner, and then the screw would draw the material up to the discharge end. At the discharge end, there's a back pressure plate, which restricts the material and compresses it. This results with the water from the biosolids pushing out through the screen mesh on the unit and through the drain. The water then is returned back to the head of the plant for processing. The dewatered cake is then discharged into a dumpster for disposal. It's a very simple operation. Typically, most plants with these units They'll check on the unit once or twice a day or during a shift just to make sure things are operating properly. But for the most part, it just runs unmaintained. So then, this drawing is a site plan drawing with implementing alternative C along with the improvements that were identified as part of the siting study. So we've got the new dewatering building located in the lower portion of the plant site, new headworks facility, and then the new aeration tanks and clarifier tanks located on the northern portion of the site. So alternative C gives the city the most flexibility to implement the biosolids improvements with also the process improvements on site. So the kind of the next step, going forward after this is to implement the biosolids approach into the preliminary design stages for the future wastewater plant improvements, and kind of integrate all the process improvements into one to make sure everything is sized and working properly, and then moving forward into funding and other evaluation stages. Brian, if you want to touch on kind of the project flow.
Sure. You've seen this diagram before. It just delineates the different steps needed to get to a final project. And I would say that this study kind of took a little piece out of the preliminary design. It kind of jump-started that. But as a whole, the city is essentially at 3A. You've gone through evaluating the alternatives as part of the siting study. We did a lot of due diligence with sites and properties to choose from. Then we have started the study phase and the financing phase. In particular, the infiltration inflow study is underway. So you're at 3A. And I put approximate years in parentheses. So, we'll be through the I&I and the SSDS. If not 2022, we'll be through that in 2023, upon which you can enter the design phases leading to construction. So this just gave us a little jump start to the preliminary design. We won't have to go through that evaluation at that point. And with that, we'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. City Manager O'Toole, before we open up for questions, is there anything that you would like to add?
I'll just add that prior to providing this presentation to City Council, we were able to sit down with the representatives from Tetra Tech, myself, Interim Superintendent Fetchick, and City Engineer Fordyce, and provide our comments and insights on what strategies and practices we think will be best implemented into our existing system. And we're very supportive of the alternative, or the recommendation that's presented here in Alternative C.
Very good. I would ask my colleagues as we transition to questions that we are an hour and 10 minutes into our meeting and we have yet to come to the consent agenda. So please try your best to exercise some brevity when asking questions or raising concerns. And I'd ask that our guests do the same, and if they could please speak up when they answer for the benefit of my council colleagues and for the guests in the audience, that would be terrific. In accordance with what I said at our work meeting this evening, we will go in reverse order from what I used earlier. So we will end with Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, but begin with Councilmember Kraus. Councilmember Kraus, the floor is yours if you have any questions for staff or our guests from Tetra Tech.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually think I'm going to yield the floor to my more experienced colleagues who've been working on this longer than I have.
Very good. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, any questions or comments for our guests or staff?
I don't have any specific questions. I think this was very well laid out, and we've been discussing this for a while. And in the interest of time, we're going to be working on this for a while. I will yield the floor, and so we can move through this promptly. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Del Orco.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start with some questions for our representatives from Tetra Tech. I tend to agree with the recommendation that option C looks like the best alternative moving forward, but I do have some concerns about incorporating an anaerobic digester from a plant that's 67 years old. So maybe there's some historical information on when the last time that the anaerobic digester was serviced, or what kind of state that it's in, and how it can be best restored to maximum efficiency to continue on in its capacity that it's currently served. And I also have some concerns about option D having odors associated with it, because when I look back at the siting study when it was first rolled out, all of the plans that were proposed, excepting the one where we were expanding on site, did not involve the use of a digester. It was mostly geared towards the dewatering systems. And I'm wondering if that was because odor wasn't a concern, because the land would have been in a rural area, or why the state-of-the-art new versions of the plant did not include a digester, and why we're still looking to preserve what we have here on site. And I think the conclusion at the time was that abandoning the digester process was cost prohibitive to start from scratch and to incorporate an entirely new dewatering system. So I just kind of want to suss out some of the nuances between option C and option D a little further.
Yep. No. The existing digester on site is in pretty good shape.
Okay.
There was an improvements project that was done in 2015 where the mixing system was replaced with the hydraulic mixing system, which is kind of the standard that is now being followed in the industry for mixing tanks, versus they used to be mixed with the gas that was generated, was then pumped back in and basically aerated to mix the tank. And then also the boiler system and the heat exchanger system were upgraded as part of that project too. So the equipment related to the digester is fairly new. The cover has been identified as something that will need to be replaced in the future. There's some issues with the operation of that. So those have been identified. Regarding the siting study, and one of the big things with maintaining operation on site is you have that existing infrastructure there. You have the digester, you have the piping systems and everything that are already to it. So there's definitely benefit for reusing that and continuing to use that. With relocating the site, being, yes, it was going to be further out of town, and the cost associated with implementing a new digestion, building a new digester tank and the equipment involved with it, it wasn't necessarily the most feasible approach to do with relocating the site. And that's why, it was focused more just on the dewatering aspect of biosolids handling.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up, I think a key component to how we move forward with dealing with the sludge, the focus should be on reducing the volume and reducing the contamination as much as possible, because as we move forward, I'm quite certain that this is going to be more expensive to get rid of moving forward, as it's going to be considered a hazardous waste at some point. And I like the idea that option C gives us both the flexibility to move back and forth between land application and landfill, because we don't know what's going to happen with state regulatory requirements surrounding land application. But adding in option C, adding this dewatering feature with this press at the end of it, that will significantly reduce the volume of our current sludge waste biosolid accumulation that has to be hauled off. Is that correct, or is it simply just a marginal difference?
It's a considerable volume reduction, because right now you're handling a liquid material in those storage tanks, which is at 3 to 4% solids. So it's like a slurry. Whereas when you process the stuff using the dewatering equipment, it's gonna come out as as I kind of referred, like a topsoil, a clumpy dark material, solids material. So yeah, the volume is greatly reduced between the two operations.
Okay, nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Delorco. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I'll start with a quick question for the city manager, which is the city still pursuing an additional look over evaluation of our wastewater treatment facility?
Yes, OHM is in the process of completing that second look from the siting study that was previously completed by Tetra Tech. And I do expect, hopefully by our next meeting, a report out on that.
Okay, so are we, I understand keep moving forward on this trajectory, but are we going too far before we have the second opinion as to whether or not we're even on the right path?
Based on previous council comments, it appears to me that we have consensus for the grow in place strategy. So it makes sense from a staff perspective to look at our existing facilities and what we expect to be, known operations and improvements, and start building for at least phase one of those wastewater treatment plant improvements.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just wasn't sure if, I know we had agreed to the grow in place. I just didn't know whether it was that they were evaluating the process, the time frame, and such. So that was where my question lies. So I will go back to Tetra Tech and first say thank you very much for this vast amount of information. I did have a little bit of difficulty hearing at times, so I apologize if you asked and answered the questions that I have. When you had mentioned about incineration, did Yucca indicate at all why they would not consider saline?
Brent, I can take that on if you wish. It's just their policy not to contract for the biosolids because of risk associated with the chemical composition of biosolids from another community. They only dispose of biosolids that are part of their operating system.
Okay. Are there other areas in which they do, other incinerators in which they would take outside?
There's only 3 incinerators in Michigan. The city of Warren is one. They do not take biosolids from other communities. And the Great Lakes Water Authority is another, and they also do not take biosolids.
Okay. So the only way to do incineration is to have your own system in place?
It would appear to be, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. I think my last question is really, which of the options is going to provide the best quality of life for those residents that surround this facility? Because I know right now we are talking about, this alternative C still has the methane gas, which I know is sort of the root of some of the evil coming with odor from the plant. So is there any opportunity to reduce odor, to do any kind of hybrid concept? I think that's what C is, where you can go back and forth between two things, but is that cost effective?
One of the benefits of C is you're no longer storing that material on site for half a year before it's land applied. I think there's some concern that there are odors coming out of the sludge storage tanks, so you would be eliminating that. As part of the improvements, the cover on the existing digester would be replaced to better seal that up and contain that biogas, and then we'd be more efficiently, process and handle from that point to try to eliminate any release of that. By maintaining the existing digester operation, you're, as I said, you're stabilizing that biosolids material and helping to reduce odors from it. So there's the benefit of that also.
Thank you very much. I'll stop there, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Seo, any questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Brian, or Brent, either one, your cost for alternative C on page 13 of $4.1 million, does that cover the entire footprint of the alternative C outline on page 16?
Bear with me a second.
Mr. CEO, are you referring to 16 of the presentation or the?
Yes, of the PowerPoint presentation.
If I recall 16, we were just showing simply in 16 how alternative C fit within all of the improvements proposed in the siting study.
Okay, so the biosolids don't include necessarily all the things on the north end of the property there.
That's correct.
Okay.
This was just a geographic exercise to show how it fit.
So eventually then we're looking at getting rid of the RBCs, which are up here in the northern end with the eventual improvements that would come with all of this. Is that correct?
They would be additional costs, fully itemized in the siting study.
All right. Now, I was looking at your dewatering screw press, which is on page 15. Now, with all the things that people dispose of in the toilet that they're not supposed to, is this screw press a weak, an Achilles heel based on the kinds of things that might end up in there?
That's a good question. Ideally, with the improvements taking place at the plant, you would be installing new fine mechanical bar screens at the influent of the plant. That's going to remove the majority of the debris that's coming down the sewer. It's sticks, other things, rags, and collect that stuff and dispose of that stuff in the dumpster before it gets downstream into the digester and into this process. Okay. So the majority of the material would be removed before it got to the press.
Okay.
And if there was debris in the unit, it would likely just travel up the screw and be discharged at the end. It wouldn't necessarily plug the openings in the screens of the unit.
As it seems to me, we're always putting out public announcements about fog and all the other kinds of things that tend to goof up the wastewater system. And the screw process just looked to me like perhaps one more mechanical system that could be knocked offline by some kind of haphazard introduction into the system. But it should be filtered out before it gets there.
Yep, it should be filtered out, and most of these installations that I've gone and visited and everything, there's minimal maintenance involved with these units. It's actually kind of impressive. So.
Okay, well, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Seo. And last, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
Just a couple quick questions, I'm hoping. All of these, like the seal, the screw press and all these other items, will be sealed. And when you're talking about dumping all the sludge, or in the case of the pre-screening, all of that will continue to be dumped into, you say, dumpsters. But are those all sealed, and how do those all involve in this terms? Are they different than what we currently do?
Yes, currently right now, there aren't mechanical bar screens at the inlet of the plant. That stuff is manually raked off the bar screens, put into buckets and disposed of. So, when that part of the project takes place in the future, that'll be contained within a building. There will be, odor control measures included in that building to try to treat that air. The material is typically, washed off to clean organics off of it to reduce odors, and then it would be deposited in a dumpster. With the biosolids material, this too, the intent would be to locate the units and the dumpsters that they dispose of within a building with an odor control system to collect any odors that are coming off of that material and abate that.
Okay. And when we talk about, excuse me for a minute, storage of actually the biosolids themselves, you're not recommending any additional storage in in terms of tanks, that we currently have enough storage with this process, even if there should be a hiccup in terms of the ability to haul or land application?
Yep, nope, that's a very good point. By keeping the existing storage, the 500,000 gallon and the 280,000 gallon tank you have on site, that provides you, storage redundancy. If there were to be an issue, with the dewatering equipment, you could, for a period of time, divert it, store it in those tanks as you currently do. There's right now that's 100, almost 180 days worth of storage there on site now. So that would give you time to service any equipment that needs service, and then start the system back up and begin the dewatering process again. To implement the dewatering, the alternative C, we would stop, sending sludge to those storage tanks on a regular basis. It would go to the smaller 30-foot diameter digesters that we have on site, and then be pumped from those digesters to the screw press for processing. And we wouldn't be storing anything in the larger tanks any longer.
Okay. And how often will they be hauling sludge based on this process? Every day, every other day?
Given the plant loads, you're probably going to be changing out a dumpster, every 2 to 3 days.
So that would be a different type of approach than we currently do right now. So we'd have more traffic and trucks than such.
Yeah, you would go from the sludge, the period of time now where you have the tanker trucks, running sludge out of there for a couple weeks at a time, to, a dumpster truck coming on and off site, a few times a week.
And the transmission of the sludge from the dumpster into the hauling truck or whatever, is that a process that would, currently we know causes odors? Would that be a process where you're moving just a dumpster that's sealed to a truck and then they put in a new one, or is it something where it's an open dump?
Ideally, it would fall within the dumpster inside the building. They would back up, pull that dumpster out, and then replace that one with an empty dumpster, and then take the full dumpster offsite.
And you indicated that the biosolids that are in this process have a lesser smell because of the water being out of it and so forth?
It's part of the digestion process. It helps to kill off, the pathogens and the organisms that are producing that odor, and reduce the amount of odor in the material as compared to undigested material. So there's the possibility there's still going to be a little bit of odor there, but it should be minimized, and then also, with odor control measures in the building to try to eliminate them.
Okay. And then lastly, I know you indicated that this option, alternative C, was the most low cost effective and so forth. If money wasn't a question, is alternative C still the best option?
In my opinion, I think it is. It gives you the most flexibility down the road, because you have the ability, to land apply if necessary, if something would happen at a landfill and rates would escalate. But it also lets you dewater the material enough so that it can go to landfill. I guess that's one of the things I didn't mention. Landfills won't take liquid sludge like you currently have in your storage tanks. It has to be dewatered, and it has to pass a paper test on how much liquid actually comes out of it and is held. So that's kind of why you have to dewater the material to take it to a landfill.
Okay. No, that's helpful. Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor, at this point.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gerba. City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
No, not at this time.
Very good. Well, we will revisit this issue again in the near future. Gentlemen from Tetra Tech, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and your analysis. Have a wonderful evening. We will talk to you soon. We transition now to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move is distributed.
Moved by CO to approve the consent agenda as submitted. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dylan. Hearing no discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Excuse me, we move on to new business item 21-31, rescheduling of public hearing. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the revised special assessment resolution and to adopt the revised special assessment resolution 21-31-2, setting the public hearing for April 19th, 2021 at 7 p.m. to receive comment on the proposed public improvement.
Move to acknowledge and adopt.
Very good. It's been moved by Gearbaugh. Was that seconded by Kraus? Yep. Very good. I think this issue is self-explanatory. City Clerk, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I do have a question for the previous motion. Did somebody vote no for the approval of the consent agenda?
Not that I'm aware of, and no.
Okay.
It was unanimous.
Okay. For this, a portion of the public hearing notice was not posted, and we did find that there have been some changes in ownership of houses over in the special assessment district. So we are going to get out new notices and repost this and bring this back on the 19th.
Very good. Are there any questions for the city clerk? There appear to be none at the dais or from those participating remotely, so we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, seconded by Councilmember Kraus, to acknowledge and to adopt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 21-41, South Ann Arbor Street outdoor dining. Let's simply begin with a motion to acknowledge receipt of the March 31st, 2021 memo from City Manager O'Toole.
So moved.
Moved by Dylan. Was that seconded by Kamara Sulak?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. City Manager O'Toole, I'm going to begin with you, and then I'll transition to Holly Andrews from Saline Main Street. Again, I would ask you both to use brevity, take no more than about 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions from my colleagues. I do want to emphasize that I'm looking for just questions at this time. We can get into a more robust discussion on the merits of this proposal during the subsequent motion. So I'll begin with you, City Manager O'Toole.
Thank you. After our previous council meeting discussion, we've made some amendments to the request to reflect both council comments and feedback from business owners and participants in our resident survey. I'll start by kicking it off with the results of the resident survey, if you'll bear with me. Here we're summarizing the results of our roughly 5-question, I believe, resident survey, asking people to weigh in on whether or not they support the closure of South Ann Arbor Street for use as an outdoor dining area. As you can see, overwhelmingly, the responses were in favor of doing so, approximately 86%. And these same results were mirrored whether the individual responding was exclusively a resident of the city of Saline or from one of the surrounding townships or outside our community. Generally speaking, on the open-ended questions, what other activities individuals would like to see the space used for this season, some common themes emerged: live music, children's and kids activities, pop-up business spaces, finding ways to continue to connect with the farmers market, hosting outdoor games, food trucks, and arts and crafts events. Generally speaking, just finding more ways to use the space this season for public activities. We also asked respondents to indicate whether they visited the outdoor dining area last year. And again, overwhelmingly, many of the participants, about 3 out of 4 responded that they did, in fact. And then those comments are mirrored in the final comment section, with many people indicating that they would visit again this year. A strong number of participants in the survey indicating that they still feel uncomfortable with indoor dining, and they view the outdoor dining as a reasonable option. And then some mixed comments for people that identified themselves as living on or near South Ann Arbor Street, so South Ann Arbor, Henry. Comments were mixed regarding whether they were in favor or not regarding the closure, and then some mixed comments from individuals regarding whether it should be open 7 days a week or just Thursday to Sunday. One other set of comments that I noticed, there were multiple responses on, are maintaining accessibility, which was cited as an issue with last year's setup. So those are the general comments from the survey. The rest of the changes that have been discussed are presented in the memo. I won't reread the memo for the sake of time. I'll hand it off now to Holly Andrews.
Very good, Holly. If you want to take 5 minutes to present. Diane Mucklow, will you be joining Holly? Yes. Very good. And when you ladies are done with your 5-minute presentation, we'll do a round of questions.
Diane is going to take the lead on this presentation, and I will be here to answer questions as well as anybody else if there's anything specific that you guys.
Very good.
Good evening. Nice to see everyone.
Nice to see you, Diane.
Good evening. Okay, I am on the CRRT. I actually just came on in December. I was asked to help with the business summit. I was just so moved and taken by all the comments at the business summit that I wanted to jump in and continue to help this committee help all the businesses. My father was a small retail business owner, so I know the struggles during regular times and difficult times. So this is really going to be a summary. We heard a lot from you at the last council meeting, and we had a lot of meetings from that council meeting to this one with business owners, retail owners, store owners, and so the schools, to try to get some of the answers to your concerns. So I'm going to, these just talk about who's on the committee. I'm going to slide ahead. I want to do one kind of summary of the survey. We gave you a lot of information there. I think the most significant thing in that survey was that first point that 23% of the people said, when asked the level of impact, low, medium, high impact, and 23% said they could lose their business. Of that number, 3 were restaurants and 9 were retail. And so that's significant. We hear a lot about, this is just for the restaurants, the retail businesses are also impacted here. We already saw the cheese the cheese shop close, which was unfortunate last month, and hopefully that will be the last closure. Also at the business summit, we heard a lot about the small businesses and their struggles, and they're not getting people in the doors. So this is a wide issue for all types of businesses. And it also is for, as we heard from different people, the whole city, not just the downtown. The CRT just did prioritize the downtown because the summer was coming, but we already had conversations about helping both ends of the town through the chamber, and that will be our next big piece to work on, like how can we support them to do outside seating or some kind of social districts or something. So we will be helping other businesses as well. We had a really interesting conversation with Tyler Kenley, and he really opened our eyes about the vacancies, and certain vacancies will cause other vacancies. Gave us the view from that and how, you know, he's deferring rent, he's letting rent go. He's really, their company is trying to work with these businesses as well. And it's clear that this recovery, you know, is going to be not short-term. This is a long-term road we're on as a community. So the 5 big concerns we heard was impact on the community, traffic and safety, community use of the space, time frame is too long, and return on investment. So those are the things I'm going to summarize here. Impact on the community, we heard from the survey, so the people feel that they would like it to come back. Another concern there on the impact was the traffic and safety. We did talk to the schools, and I'm pretty sure Kurt Allison is on the call tonight if you need any questions answered. The school bus drivers anticipate there won't be any problems, and they're not concerned about the closure from a school perspective. Mickey Joe checked with Washtenaw County. There's no construction projects or detours that would, maybe double impact that area. Quantum Signal had been indicated that the autonomous vehicle testing would not be impacted by the closure, and they're in support of it. I did hear from Chief Hart, but we couldn't confirm this with other people in the room, so we are putting this down as unconfirmed, but I believe he's on it as well, and he indicated that he would have patrols scheduled to go through those detours to make sure that they remain safe and traffic flows there. The next concern was the community space. This shows that...
Can I help with this one?
Sure.
Okay, so this just shows you,
it is there.
there is, these brick colors are the footprints of the businesses. This is Max, this is the Market pop-up, this is Kerrigan Cafe, this is Excalibur Barber, and this is Cobblestone Rose, the former Benito's, Breck & Grill, and Smokehouse 52. We have the square here, would go right to here, the barricades would be here, leaving the parking in front of Marty's Excalibur. We're preserving your parking and the turnaround in front of Cobblestone Rose. The only time that this would be closed would be for Thursday night, Salty Summer Sounds, our summer concert series. This right here, Colleen and I portioned off a section that will always be for community use. So that will not necessarily be, that won't be used by the restaurants or taken up by seating. We have Kerrigan Cafe has a section, Max has a section, Breck & Grill, and Smokehouse 52. We have this whole space, and those tables and chairs are used on off times, when most of the time when the restaurants are not open. They offer these places up for farmers market use. People use them for meetings. They use them for art. They use them for birthday parties. They use it for whatever they need. And this whole section is really widely used by the community. So go ahead. Okay.
Taking off on that, so there are some already events scheduled. SLI is going to be doing children's crafts, Salt Valley Arts will be there, youth groups, Saturday morning farmers, as she mentioned, live music. So there's already things that are planned, and we're in conversation with the public library and the rec center to do some kind of collaboration to bring them down. And we're thinking about other organizations that we could collaborate to bring down there to give free events for the community and activities. Let's see, those are all the planned stuff, but this shows last year what also just popped up. This is a group of the Philanthropic Education Organization chapter here in Saline, met there regularly. There was a meetup of antique car groups, so that brought a bunch of people in to town. There was artists coming and popping up downtown and wanting to be in that space. The University of Michigan film students were filming down there, so things will just organically evolve too. Bike meetups there occurred. So we got planned activities and we got things that occurred last year that we're sure that will occur this year. A lot of use of that space during the hours when they're not used by restaurants, but also that brings people down to use the restaurants. So that leads us to your next concern was the time frame, and we've talked a lot about all week versus weekdays. We heard a lot from the business owners. I think we mentioned last time it costs more to tear it down and build it back up each week by the DPW, about $500 per week. This, if it was permanent, semi-permanent, we would provide the opportunity to, you know, decorate it, have more signage, more curbside appeal. That will help just bring more people from other areas in. The weather is a factor. We talked about that. You do 4 days and it rains and you don't, you know, you lose that week. That gives a bigger opportunity to have a good week. And the thing we heard a lot in the last couple of meetings was the difficulty of planning staffing. People don't want to work just the weekends. People need to work the full day week. So they're going to have a hard time with staffing. And, you know, we know from the past, staffing is difficult in the city anyways to get enough workers. So that will add to that problem. And it's also difficult for them for inventory planning as well, and the impact on that. So those are the reasons we would like to go for the full week. And then the other time frame concern was that it was too long of a season. You know, so ideally, we would like May through October. And just to reiterate, the restaurants need as much time and the retail shops need as much time as they can get. The retail shops talked a lot, and there's people on the call that can attest to the impact on their businesses go up when people are coming down to the square. The recovery period's long. It's not just going to be this year for them. So if we could make it as long as possible, that would help. Again, planning staffing, planning inventory. The situation is worse now than it was a year ago, and now with COVID, I don't know how our numbers are going so high in Michigan. You know, who knows what will happen again. And so, and the restaurants have already purchased a lot of outdoor seating and things from last year that they can use again and get a return on their investments. So we recognize.
I'm sorry, can I just jump in? But the point on that is retail businesses and some of the businesses that still have things to buy, to have outdoor seating and to make this business or this season work, they need to have a return on their investment. So when you have 3 months to make a return on your investment, when rock, paper, scissors is getting ready to do kids' activities and artists are planning events and the restaurants are buying umbrellas and you know, partitions and signage, and Saline Main Street is purchasing things to make this more attractive, and the city is purchasing things to create amenities and decorations. We need it to be in place in order for us to see our economy get the benefit and for these businesses to get a return on their investments, because with every adaptation and everything that they do for the square or anything or any season change, they have to open their pockets and they need a return on those investments.
So we heard you. So the proposal is to start with thinking of it as a phase 1, May through August. And in the start of May, because Mother's Day's in there, and that would really help the end of school parties, graduation, that would really help them starting May 1st. And then in August, the council, with the help of the city manager and the mayor, you could do an assessment and talk about, you know, do we need to adjust anything? Is it working? Are we getting what we wanted? And then extend it for another 2 months and look at it again in August. And again, ideally, we'd like to go to October, but if there's a hesitancy, at least we would think about, we would go to October, but you'd have this opportunity to check in August and see what you find, and then determine if you can support 2 more months. That's the time frame. And, you know, just on that note, this is a picture of people waiting 2 hours in September to get into a restaurant. So September was magical for some reason last year.
Well, it was the restaurants and retailers' best month. You know, the summer heat was turned down. It was a reward, and everybody was in love with the square. So they came out and they opened their pockets and they tipped and they went shopping, and it was
Diane, Holly, I do need to keep this moving along. I apologize. I'm not being rude, but yeah, if we can wrap this up, that would be great.
Okay, so return on investment, we already heard from the restaurants, they gave their numbers. And, you know, we need to look at lessons from our neighbors. You know, Milan, Chelsea, Dexter, Ipsy, and Ann Arbor are all doing it again this year. They've already committed to do it again, and hopefully we will too. And, you know, this just shows that people came from Breck and Grill, you know, other places indicate that people were from out of town. We got people coming from out of town. But it wasn't just downtown. Salt Breweries, Springs Brewery benefited from it. Dan said he benefited from it. Even though he wasn't on the square, he benefited from that, and you can see that. So we need to think about this. Even Rock, Paper, Scissors opening up the pop-up store because of this traffic was a huge success, and people were waiting in lines to go in. And then the last thing is the quality of life, rebranding of Saline. Saline needs this. People need to get out. People are struggling and stressed, and they want to get out. But we heard people are still concerned about going inside. Not everybody, but just to be able to go and reconnect and see people and have a joyous place ongoing the whole summer, this would be really, really good for the community and really good for individuals. And it's needed. It's really needed. And so with that, I'll end.
Very good. Well, hang tight, ladies. And City Manager O'Toole.
Thank you, great job.
Well, I know you're on the call as well. So we will open it up for questions. Again, we're just looking for questions now for either our guests or for city staff. If you don't have a question, just pass, and we can entertain your thoughts and ideas when we get to the subsequent motion. So again, we're going in the reverse order of what is enumerated on your agenda. So I'll begin with Councilperson Kraus.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. It was a lot of good information. The budget impact, 12,000. Can someone, maybe Ms. O'Toole or Mr. Green, explain, is that man-hours plus the barricades? What does that consist of?
Yes, I'd be happy to explain. So that's man-hours and the cost to purchase barricades permanently, and hopefully to consider incorporating some, I guess for lack of a better word, beautification efforts around those barricades. So again, it doesn't just look like a construction zone this season if we do move forward with the project.
Okay, thank you. And so that's not leasing. We would own those barricades, then could use them for future use?
Yes, I would like us to identify something that we can own internally and use for future, public events.
And these are the barricades Chief Hart feels are the safer, more sturdy, robust ones?
Yeah, any barricades, any final selection will certainly be made with the, consideration of both our police chief and fire chief in terms of making sure that aligns with our public safety goals, so.
Okay, thanks, that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, Councilperson Kraus. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a lot of information. I appreciate all the work that's gone into the survey, all the business owners, Saline Main Street, and everybody that's taken part in this. This is obviously really important. I had the opportunity to attend the CRRT meeting last Tuesday. It was very enlightening from the standpoint of all that the businesses, and like has already been said, not just the restaurants, but also more of the retail establishments as well. And another thing that was that makes a difference is these businesses give back to the community. They give money, they fund, they support sports, extracurricular activities, a lot of the downtown events. Oktoberfest being one of my favorite, and I think that's also goes into this decision. It is all the goodwill and help that they bring and make our community what it is. Now, if there's excessive vacancies, then those buildings will have a negative impact, and there'll be tax consequences to that. I'm glad to hear that there's no that we have it covered with the police department, fire department, that there's no busing concerns. I have a question regarding the barricades. Now, these more permanent, solid, better looking barricades is it safe to say that they are safer in protecting that open space?
I'm not familiar with what was used last season, but what I can say is the barricades that we're considering are heavily weighted because they're filled with either water or sand, most likely water, so that they'd be easier to move in the event of an emergency. And yes, once water is added, they're incredibly heavy and resistant, to, I guess, traffic accidents. Certainly, we can't guarantee absolute blockage of, a large vehicle moving at excessively high speeds. But, for minor traffic incidents, if that were to occur, they are quite heavy.
Okay, well, that's good. So I feel it's important to address the safety concerns. I also factored in that if we had just the impact on the cheese shop closing, and if we were to have any other businesses closing because of this, when we can do, we're trying to do as much as we can, that would also cast a shadow on potential businesses thinking about coming to Saline or opening up in some of our vacant spaces. Looking at the strong community outcry in favor of this was quite surprising. And in a number of people that I've talked to, and Ms. Kraus, I know especially put it out there and was able to obtain significant citizen feedback. I was really surprised by the overwhelming support. So all of these different factors went in to my decision, to my thought process, and in coming to a decision here. So I will leave it at that and yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Delorco, and again, I'm trying to focus on questions at this time. We'll have an opportunity to discuss the merits of this proposal during the subsequent motion.
I understand. No questions at this time. I'll defer comments to the discussion portion.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I really appreciate that Main Street was listening to what we had said and is addressing our concern. I do have a couple of questions. One, I would really like to see a public safety plan in place. If we're talking about barricades and people and tables and chairs, if there were an emergency, what is the plan to have access to that road? And are people going to be aware of it? Is it going to be chaos? Is there going to be a disaster because of a disaster? And I really want to see that put into place. We've kind of skirted this issue of, it's not really a problem. Well, nothing's a problem till it's a problem. And I really need that piece to be there to feel confident in this. I really do. I also think that there's some other issues that I'm not quite grasping right now, which is just what is fair and equitable. Right now, should Barbecue 52 have a bigger piece of the roadway because they have less sidewalk or alleyway or such? I mean, to just give everybody the same piece of the pie, I don't know if that's the right approach to it. I do think that there needs to be a very clear piece that is public And it shouldn't just be the outcast, whatever is left over piece. I do have some concerns about that. And whether those people are going to feel like they're on the outside looking in. This is supposed to be one cohesive development. And so I would like to see that happen. There's been no talk at this point of, is there any option? Are you looking at closing North Ann Arbor Street again? Is that not an option, that the only focus would be on South Ann Arbor Street? And my biggest thing is this road closure tied to capacity? If restaurants were to open to 100%, are we going to keep the road closed? I think that there's a lot of pieces that I think need to still be addressed. I am not saying by any means that I am opposed to closing the road. I just think that there are pieces that still need to be put into place before this program would to be activated. And my last concern is, as we look at this, it talks about economic recovery. We're missing everybody beyond the four corners right now. And I appreciate that, it's at work, we're gonna get to it. Well, those people need help right now too. And so there needs to be a plan in place of what are we doing for everybody that's outside of downtown. It can't be an afterthought of let's get this set up and then we'll do something. Well, they need help too. And so I'd like to see the CRRT team really focusing on that aspect right now of what are we going to do as a community. You talk about businesses aren't going to want to come here. Businesses are not going to want to come to Saline if they're not on the four corners getting all of the attention. So I think we need to have a very holistic approach, and I'd like to see that coming forward.
Thank you. Those are good points, and we'll definitely bring those up at our next meeting.
Okay, Mr. Seal, I'm going to transition to you again. I don't know how I could be any more clear on this with great respect to my colleagues. I am looking for questions here. So if you have questions for either staff or our guests, please ask them and we will have ample opportunity to engage in discussion during the subsequent motion.
I'm sold on the matter, I pass.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, any questions?
Just a couple. Ms. O'Toole, can you clarify, I believe, or Mr. Green, food trucks are not allowed to be parked on public streets or in public parking lots. Isn't that correct, without a permit? There was a question about that, and I want to make sure that there's clarification. This is to support the brick and mortar, not food trucks.
I'll have to defer to Assistant City Manager Green. I'm not familiar enough.
Mr. Green, are you on the call? I believe that food trucks are not permitted in the downtown,
Correct.
outside of special events.
Yep. Dean, you are correct.
Okay, just want to clarify that. And Ms. O'Toole, is there anything preventing us from hiring additional staff or individuals to assist with the potential moving or relocation of some of the barriers and stuff during the week? We have the COVID funding that's coming in.
I mean, there's nothing that prohibits us other than, I'd say it's an extremely restrictive hiring market right now. Are you talking about like temporary summer help or something to that effect?
Yeah, temporary summer help or something like that, because generally we do hire, but that would be an approach that potentially if we could hire someone from that. I was more concerned whether there's a restriction on how we can use city dollars for supporting this kind of initiative beyond just moving barriers and whatever.
No, we'd certainly be able to dedicate more staff.
Okay. And then lastly, is there a plan in place to make sure that the fire lane that's behind all the buildings on South Ann Arbor Street is clearly enforced, that cars are not parking there or blocking? I mean, that is a concern that the chief of police, chief of fire had mentioned to me, that there is a concern of fire and ability to access those buildings on South Ann Arbor Street, and that we need to make sure that that's occurring. And then lastly, the last question is, what exactly are the spaces that will be closed on Michigan Avenue? I'd like that clarified at this point. There was a concern. I want to make sure that they're not all closed on the southeast corner, because I've had concerns from the tenants in those buildings and from individuals working in Mod Squad that they need to have spaces available for their elderly and handicapped staff to be able to access those buildings. From the front, they do not have rear entrances.
We'll
So,
do
just-
whatever,
Colleen, do you want me to take
whatever you
that?
require for that, for parking. I don't think in front of Wally's, I think we took that temporary curbside parking out. We removed it because Wally said it was too unsafe to do that. Is that right? Yep. Yeah, so all of that parking is open and
Will be open,
available
okay.
in front of Mod Squad.
And similar on
Accent
the-
Jewelers.
Okay, and similar on the north side, in case there's any of those businesses that need to be able to park. I know there are two that's dedicated, but just to make sure there's one or two over there.
He's referring to like in front of Dan's or the Saline Optometry.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, not all of that is taken up none of that is part of the traffic control order, right, Chief? I don't believe that ever was. They're just, yeah,
There's been some proposals where that was resubmitted, and I read now on here, but it just mentions Michigan Avenue and doesn't clarify. I just want to make sure that in this public meeting, we're stating that those spaces will be left open.
Okay, and I think that
everything-
first proposal that I submitted about 5 weeks ago has the traffic control order as it was last year, so that all of those things should be clearly outlined in that as well.
All right, thank you. That's it for my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Very good, thank you. If there are no further questions, we do have a motion on the floor moved by Dillon, seconded by Kamara Sulak to simply acknowledge receipt of the March 31st, 2020 memo from City Manager O'Toole. All those in favor of acknowledging receipt signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. And now the chair would entertain a motion to approve or not to approve the request to establish the downtown outdoor dining area and downtown traffic control orders effective April 30th, 2021 through August 29th, 2021, and to authorize, not authorize the city mayor to enact permitting and application standards.
Motion to approve and authorize.
Okay, I'll let Kamara Sulak be the mover to approve and to authorize, and CO, were you the second?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good. Okay, we'll open it up for discussion. Again, I'll begin with Councilmember Kraus. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Mayor. So I am in support of the street closure. I know that is not without problems on the other side. It doesn't mean that I'm not in support of it. I've taken a long time trying to vet out the different opinions from a lot of residents. I spent some time at the 109 the other day with Holly in deep conversation. I'm always sorry when a decision has to be made that seems like it's not a win-win, but I honestly think that a temporary closure is a win-win for the entirety of the city. It can be hard to see that when you're maybe on a street that's going to be busier. I live on West Henry, and I lived on that street when US 12 was shut down, so I certainly do understand. And I think Mrs. Schneider mentioned it, the police department is up to the challenge of hopefully taking care of that. I graduated from high school here in '88, and the downtown has not changed much, its footprint. It's not larger. That's 33 years. I am not an economist, I'm not a developer, but it looks the same as it did when I lived here when I was a kid. So pulling any one of those businesses out could be like a game of Jenga, and the instability that could bring will have a ripple effect through the entire town. Helping downtown does not preclude us from helping the others. I don't understand personally why it's been framed that way in conversation, and that kind of bothers me. I'm a new council member. I've been curating and begging for information to learn, and I've not heard from anyone except I had a nice conversation with Wally the other day. But I would be happy to entertain other businesses and see what we could do. Again, it doesn't preclude us from helping others. I had a lot more I want to say, but I'm trying to be mindful of time and my colleagues, but I am in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kraus. I think I transition now to Councilmember Kamara Sulak, if there's anything you'd like to add.
I'll make it brief this time because I addressed most of it previously. But I too spend a lot of time considering the pros and cons for this and what's in the best interest of the citizens for Saline. And there's a lot of different factors, but there's so much more in the positive side. for our community. And so with the overwhelming support that I see, and acknowledging that there will be some that feel differently, and that it's it's going to be more difficult for a couple of the businesses, I support this.
Thank you, Councilmember Kamara Sulak. Councilmember Delorco.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to state for the public and everyone in the room today that I think the plan before us this evening is much more robust than what we saw at last week's council meeting. I appreciate the survey. That was something that I wanted to see from the community retention team, and that has been ferreted out and carefully performed. It's clear that there's overwhelming support from the community, members of the community, both in the city of Saline and the townships, to support this moving forward. And I am put here by the people, for the people, to bring their voice to this table. There are a couple things I'd like to see moving forward. A more robust effort to facilitate a revenue restoration to restaurant owners outside the downtown area, restaurant owners and retailers. I certainly appreciate what the Saline Main Street organization does for the city of Saline. I want that focus to go beyond the four corners. Part of my evolution in thinking on this matter is come about through the capricious nature of the pandemic. The Washtenaw County Department of Health has declared a state of emergency since we last met, and that has definitely pushed me in the direction of wanting to move forward in this initiative. That being said, the success of this is predicated on the faith that the licenses will be granted by the state of Michigan for liquor. I would like an opportunity to evaluate this again in the event that for whatever reason those licenses are not granted. Those issues notwithstanding, I support the motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Delorco. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I obviously had quite a bit to say first round. I had some very good conversations this afternoon with the city manager about my concerns. And what I would like to see is that I feel like we've definitely made a lot of progress in the right direction, and I think there is consensus to close the road. I do think that the fine print needs to be refined. We're talking about using 2020 traffic orders, and we've now just talked about, well, do we still need those in place? Does that need to be reassessed at this point? Like I had mentioned, the way in which this property is divided, and now adding a public element to it, and now the salty sounds, does that impact, now once you're going to go that way, now how does that impact Salt and their access to their side little alleyway? If the road were to need to be closed all the way, does that impact their business? I think that there's a lot of little nuances that need to be worked through. And so I would be more inclined to approve a broader statement of that we're in agreement to close the road from time period to time period, with the city manager vetting the process more. There are still issues, the liquor issue that Mr. Delorco just, brought about, of whether these businesses are actually going to have those full permits. And should these businesses not adhere to what the city wants, what are the city's, ability to close it? And, once again, I'll go back to my first thing, which is I would like to see a public safety plan in place. So that is very clear, should there be an emergency, what the plan would be.
City Manager O'Toole, I don't mean to put you on the spot. The way the motion is worded, especially that last statement, my interpretation is that you have the discretion and the ability to do some of the things that Councilmember Dillon is making reference to, but perhaps you could elaborate.
Yes, that really is the intent of what's included in my memo and what's included in this motion. is that obviously for the 2021 season, we're going to need to establish a new permitting process. And as part of that permitting process, incorporate some of the changes and language to address concerns identified during our previous two meetings, as well as opportunities for addressing instances where perhaps compliance becomes an issue and how the city will handle enforcement of use of that space moving forward. To Councilmember Dillon's point on the traffic control orders, certainly council has the discretion to direct both myself and our police chief that, they can direct us to issue a traffic control order for just the South Ann Arbor Street closure and consider other parking space or curbside pickup closures in a separate conversation, or direct us to consider it all under one direction. But right now, as this is written, as the motion is written, we are considering the closure of Ann Arbor Street and all of the existing traffic control orders from 2020, with myself assuming responsibility for oversight of permitting and any application processes.
Anything else, Councilmember Dillon?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Seal.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. As stated at the last meeting, I'm in support of this. I think that it serves the greater good to maintain the businesses, keep them open in as much as we can. I would like to see an effort made toward seeing what we can do to support other businesses outside of the immediate downtown area, as some of them have asked for. I think that there might still be some ways that we can begin to have constructive conversations with them to include more in what we do as a city to help support those other businesses that are outside the main business district. And I guess I would challenge those thinking heads in City Hall to see what they can do to engage in that kind of an activity. I think that, like my colleagues have said, it serves the greater good to close downtown, the street downtown, and I have faith in our ability to monitor it carefully, and if conditions change, to change our whole situation accordingly. So I intend to vote in favor. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. And Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
Yeah, I've done a lot of, talking with different individuals, public officials, former elected officials, the fire chief and other individuals. There are concerns with closing the street on a permanent basis. So the idea of permanently closing it and removing it as a public thoroughway is just not in the cards for me in the future. We have to look at it from the COVID perspective. There is a concern here, and we don't know with this fourth wave that's occurring. The business impact has been incredible, and we need to allow for it. I was fine with a partial week closure, but because looking at this and the perspective of assessing it, it's just not worth the concerns. All the other cities are, of course, doing this. They're making it temporary. We don't know what's going to happen a year from now, and we need to be concerned about that. My concern is that because we're closing this, there are going to be issues with traffic. Rerouting, anyone going south is going to be going down Harris Street, is going to be going down Monroe or down Lewis, or trying vice versa, trying to get to the north. Because we aren't enforcing traffic like we were because of COVID and contacts and that such in nature, I'm concerned at how the chief will be able to enforce that, but I'm sure he'll be able to figure that out. As for providing additional support, I would like to see how else we can, if there are concerns and issues that are related to our DPW not being able to help or do those type of things, potentially we can hire additional staff or something to help with that. And of course, like the rest of my colleagues, we need to figure out a way to provide support to our other commercial areas within the city. And I think this is a predecessor to that, but we will be doing that. I think that has been a clear indicator of what we need to do. And at this point in time, moving forward with this motion, it may not be the best of both worlds. I know people don't want to see it necessarily closed, but for this period in time, it's not worth it to vote no on it. I think we're going to move forward and just do it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. Well, let me just provide some additional thoughts first, because a number of my colleagues made reference to this. The Community Recruitment and Retention Team will meet again a week from tomorrow, April the 13th, for our bi-monthly meeting. I emailed a few people regarding the issue today, and the city manager and I discussed it as well. Diane, I didn't have a chance to reach out to you. My apologies. But one of the things, in fact, the thing I want at the top of the agenda for our next meeting is initiatives and programs to help businesses outside of the downtown, specifically those in our eastern and western corridor. And I would add, for council's benefit and the public's benefit, that over the past decade, I think we have a pretty good track record of supporting businesses throughout the community, not just restaurants and retail, but service industries and in manufacturing facilities as well. We've had 2 job fairs. We've had multiple business summits. We were strong advocates for the elimination and replacement of personal property tax, which benefited innumerable Saline businesses. And of course, we closed South Ann Arbor Street last year, and I'm very much in favor of doing that again in 2021. As my colleague Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh indicated, in a perfect world, I would probably be inclined just to close it during the weekend, maybe include Friday and Thursday as well. But from a cost and logistics perspective, that would be burdensome to both the city and to our small business owners downtown. I do think this is of critical importance. As we heard from many of our restaurateurs today, it's not hyperbolic. This may be life or death to some of them. And the vitality of our downtown is integral to our community's short and long-term success. I do want to add that I do hope that staff, specifically police, fire, DPW, any other division of city government, continue to monitor this and to report out to the city manager or my office so we can disseminate through city council. While I am supportive of the motion, I would be inclined to consider an extension if necessary. And so I would ask at this time that the city clerk make note that be added as a discussion item for our first meeting in August, which would be August the 2nd, for us to consider whether an extension of the closure is prudent and necessary. And in conclusion, I'd like to say I want to thank everybody who reached out to city government on this issue. Whether you're a downtown business owner affiliated with Saline Main Street, a private citizen, whether you completed our official poll, whether you completed a survey that Councilwoman Kraus put out, or whether you just reached out on your own accord, we do appreciate all the feedback that we received, and I think that enriched and improved the process, and it ultimately will I think, improve the outcome. So again, I'm in support of this, and we'll be voting in the affirmative. With that, we do have a motion on the floor moved by Mayor Sulak, seconded by Councilmember Seo, to approve and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Okay. Let's keep moving along here. Let's go on to new business item 21-53. This is Maple Oaks Brownfield, this Brownfield plan. Let's begin with simply a motion to acknowledge receipt of the March 31st, 2021 memo from Assistant City Manager Green.
So moved.
Who was the mover on that? I'm sorry, was that Gearbaugh?
Gearbaugh.
Gearbaugh was the mover to acknowledge receipt, and Kraus was the second. Let me start with Assistant City Manager Green, and then I'll transition to City Manager O'Toole in the event that she has anything that she'd like to add. Mr. Gearbaugh, I'm going to excuse myself for just a minute, so if we transition to Q&A, I'm going to let you take the lead on that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Green, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. So as you know, this got brought up a couple weeks ago that this is coming down the pipeline. Included in your packet is the finalized plan from Maple Oaks. The plan has been vetted by Nathan Vaught at Washtenaw County and his subcommittee. So we believe it is ready for your guys' review and decision. As noted in the memo, we do need a decision from council tonight, as this will then go to Washtenaw County Brownfield Authority and then Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners to get potentially adopted before tax rules are finalized at the end of May. So we can open up. We also have Nathan and Jameson on the call for you guys for questions later.
Alrighty. Thank you, Mr. Green. Ms. O'Toole, are there any other comments that you'd like to add?
I'd just like to add that thank you to Nathan Voigt for his assistance with drafting the resolution. He and I were able to present some language in the final resolution that addressed some early comments and concerns that we received from council, specifically to meeting milestones before the look back portion will be released. There are 2 specific milestones that are now addressed, and with this resolution that would then subsequently become a part of the final Brownfield Authority adoption. which is just making sure that the few punch list items that are outstanding for the existing development are addressed, and also that there is substantial progress made on the Maple Oaks North parcel before the remaining portion is released.
Okay, thank you, Ms. O'Toole. Mr. Voigt, any comments at this time?
No, happy to, again, be facilitating the process and assist with the resolution, and here to answer any questions or any other final concerns there may be.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to questions and answers. Ms. Kraus, would you please, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I do have a question. Maybe it's more for clarification. The last time that we spoke about this issue, there was some discussion about the actual retro payments, and would we split that difference? Would we, and the way that I read this motion right now, it's kind of an all or nothing. There's no option to split the difference on that backdated TIF.
I can answer that question. The way that the resolution is currently drafted, council is certainly free to, at the dais tonight, make changes. If it's not council's intent to fund that full portion, they could certainly propose amendments to the resolution. But at this time, as the resolution is drafted, we are incorporating the full roughly 105,000 look back portion.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hear what my colleagues have to say, and I'll yield the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerba. I'm back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Councilmember Kraus, you addressed your questions?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll transition now to Mr. Kamara-Sulek if he has questions for staff, and I would note that Mr. Godfrey, the applicant, is here as well if you have questions for the petitioner.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to build off of Mrs. Kraus's question regarding the last meeting, the discussion on negotiating I forget if it was half, but not something less than the 105,000. What happened in the meantime between this draft and the prior draft that wasn't addressed?
I can take that, City Manager O'Toole, if you don't mind. My hunch is, Councilmember Kamara-Sulek, is I'm not sure we had consensus on that particular point. I believe that was a concern or a suggestion that I raised. I would certainly be amenable to discussing it further and potentially incorporating it into the resolution, but I suspect that staff did not make that adjustment because there wasn't clear consensus from the dais to make that modification.
Okay. Because my concerns are addressed with the look back and having a holdback on some of the funds until those punch list items are adequately addressed. A sufficient amount of time has passed where those items haven't been completed, and I definitely do not want those to fall on the responsibility of the city. For the cost to do it or additional costs because they were not completed. I would feel more comfortable had those items been completed, and if the unpaid tax amount, while it's not thousands and thousands of dollars, to me that's a measure of good faith in showing that you're doing your part in paying your bills and doing what you said you were going to do, especially when it comes to, making an ask.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kamara-Sulek.
Thank you.
And actually, I think the applicant might be able to respond to that. Mr. Godfrey, would you like to respond, sir?
I would. Thanks for having us tonight.
Thank you for your patience.
I think I just want to give you an update that all the taxes have been paid. All the utility bills, the homeowners paid their bill. That was their bill. All the work that is on the punch list is going to get done in the very near future. We just learned of some of the items recently. Some of the items we thought were approved by the previous, by G2, the city's contractor, and city staff, especially the concrete work. That's okay, we're going to do it. And so if it seems like time has passed since that work was done, it's because we We just got this list, and some of the items we thought the city had already signed off on. And there are some new items on the list, but we're going to take care of it.
Thank you, Mr. Godfrey.
You bet.
Why don't you hang tight, just in the event that there are other questions that are best addressed by you. Mr. Kamara-Sulak, any additional questions, sir?
No more questions. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Del Orco.
Thank you, Mayor. So I had a chance to evaluate the city attorney's legal opinion that came forward at roughly 12:30 this afternoon. And there were some issues raised there with the attorney feeling that the city would not want to endorse a brownfield plan that was contrary to what is expected under the agreement, the purchase agreement, or any zoning approval. And then when I solicited Mr. Green's opinion on whether or not there was any inconsistencies between the purchase agreement and the brownfield plan, mainly it was the opinion that there do ostensibly appear to be some areas that are subject to interpretation as to whether or not they're consistent, surrounding issues related to how Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the projects are described, lumping them all together as Phase 1. One of them, Phase 1 being 20 units built, Phase 2 being 14 units built, and then this north side of the tracks issue being a separate phase altogether. It does not appear that the way that the phases are described are consistent between the brownfield plan and the purchase agreement, and that gives me grave pause for concern in moving forward with this tonight. Thank you.
Before I get to you, Mr. Godfrey, staff, Mr. Green or Manager O'Toole, do you care to respond to that at all?
I believe Mr. Green provided a response earlier today. Mike, would you care to kind of outline those comments again?
Yeah, so just based on Mr. Del Orco's questions, I took a quick look at the purchase agreement and Mr. Forshey's comments to try to put together an answer that I thought that was based on my opinion of reading both the brownfield plan and the purchase agreement. So as Mr. Del Orco stated, it pretty much comes down to interpretation of what council defines the phases as. The way I read the purchase agreement, Phase 1 included the first 20 units of the southern parcel, and the second phase would be the remainder of that parcel for either townhomes or single-family homes. It doesn't clearly mention the northern parcel above the tracks, but that since it all was one sale, that second portion of the development could be considered under the Phase 2. While the brownfield plan essentially breaks up the southern and northern parcel as two separate phases. So it's just pretty much your interpretation of how you read both documents.
Mr. Godfrey, anything you'd like to add, sir?
Well, I can hopefully clarify that. We called the north parcel Phase 2 because we thought it would be easier for you to think of the two projects. We could have easily called it Phase 3. So we definitely, in the purchase agreement, it only contemplates Phase 1 being the 20 units, the 10 single-family homes, the 4 condominiums, and I think 4 of the townhomes. Did I do that right? Or 6 of the townhomes. Mm-hmm. And then the second phase of the south parcel was the remaining townhomes and the second condominium building. All the while, we knew that that extra land on the north side could be a perfect complement eventually to the housing development if we could develop a plan for a mixed-use building that would provide enrichment activities and more housing for special needs adults and market rate adults looking for apartments, in good locations. So it was always we just didn't call it Phase 3. So I think it's a nomenclature issue more than some sort of contradiction.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Del Orco, anything you'd like to add?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Dillon, questions?
Thank you. I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with Mr. Green and Ms. O'Toole regarding this matter, and they answered most of my questions. I do have a question for Mr. Godfrey, though. At one point, you had mentioned that early on you decided not to pursue the brownfield because I believe you had said it wasn't worth pursuing. So at that point, was it at 50,000 was your expenses? So you were willing to leave 50,000 sitting on the table, but now you're coming back for the whole 100. So I guess I'm just a little concerned, like, well, if you were willing to let 50 go, had you not incurred any additional, then maybe we should only be looking at from that point forward. Do you understand what I'm saying? I struggle with the look back portion of this, just because of a lot of different things. It was an as-is sale, and I do think that it does, whether it sets a legal precedent or not, I feel like it opens up a door that I don't think the city should necessarily open, that I am a bit concerned about. And then I think I've got a better understanding, and Mr. Voigt might be able to help me with this, which is if we were to determine that the north parcel is a brownfield eligible, nothing is going to happen until it's actually developed. So if it isn't developed by you to the specs and it is sold to somebody else, that brownfield will always follow that property, correct?
If a brownfield plan is approved on a certain parcel and there's certain eligible activities, if there's a concern that some other developer would come in and build something that doesn't comply, we have the ultimate control to withdraw that approval. So you were in the driver's seat whether there's a concern that the brownfield plan could apply to a future owner or developer. So whether legally it stays in place, I'm not sure, but I'm confident that you have the control to withdraw that approval if there's a concern in the future.
Okay. Because it seems to me that it almost feels like we're doing the process backwards, that we're approving something that actually has never gone through planning and site and zoning and all of those things, where this may not even be a viable option for that particular parcel. And so I guess, where does that leave us, if that were the case?
Well, if that were the case, if nothing is built or nothing happens, there's nothing to reimburse. So there's no tax capture on any of those activities because they didn't occur. So there's always reimbursement of actual expenses that were incurred by a developer to perform or complete eligible brownfield activities.
Right. So I guess I think I'm struggling to adequately express where my concern is. So if this project were not to be able to be built there, that property were to be sold, and another project were to come forward, would we still have to honor that brownfield?
No. You can withdraw the approval.
Okay.
Just because you've approved one or it's been approved, it can be withdrawn.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mayor, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Go ahead, Bill. Yep.
I would just say that the entire amount of the northern parcel depends on our budget and what we've already. So if we don't develop the property, you're starting from scratch, and I think this all goes. The North Brownfield TIF goes away. The law does permit for a look back when you hit something that you didn't expect, and we started out with $716,000 request on the south parcel, and through pretty extensive conversations with the county, who was super helpful, we've ended up going from $716,000 down to $105,800. Of course, and then there's some other costs for the phase 1 and phase 2, the things that just are standard with any brownfield TIF. So I feel like we've done a lot of compromising and negotiating and compromising again with the county. We've ended up with what the law permits. So in terms of and our attorney helped write the brownfield statute. So I think we're on solid legal ground with the look back and the eligible expenses now, and that's why the county is supporting the plan. I think I actually, when I read the proposal, it was the first time I had learned about this idea to have these conditions put on 50% of the money is held back until we do our infrastructure work, which that totally makes sense. And I actually think the other 50%, just holding back on that until we get going on the north side. And if we don't do that, then the city's never going to be out that money. I actually think the solution you've come up with is pretty good, because I'm pretty confident we're going to do the north side. But of course, you have to approve it. So, and I think you will, but I mean, if, we work with staff and conform to all the zoning and, setback requirements, all that stuff. So I actually think the proposal is pretty good.
Thanks for that, Bill. Yeah. Let's transition. We got two more council members to entertain questions from. Mr. Seo, do you have any questions?
Yes, sir, I do. First of all, I want to say that we've always considered this an excellent project for the city, that the structure of it is unique enough that it offers a unique opportunity for people in need to have a residence near their loved ones who may have special needs. And I think that we need to continue to not lose sight of the fact that this is an excellent project for the city and for the developer. I think that this 50% holdback for, the conditional holdback for the two 50% pieces for the first part of the brownfield are excellent. I think that that's a very good compromise based on what we've talked about and where we are now. And I'd like to see this project move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Seo. And Mayor Pro Tem Girba, any questions?
Just a couple. The first one is to our city attorney, Mr. Forshee. Can you agree with, do you agree with Mr. Voigt that any project that we're doing on does not run with the land? It runs with the authority or whatever the original concept is?
Yeah, so I think if any change happened to the plan, they would have to do a plan amendment. So, I think, yeah, the plan could continue, but if it all fell apart and something else completely was going to go into that area, first of all, they wouldn't have any expenses to reimburse, and secondly, they would have to amend their brownfield plan because it wouldn't be consistent. The work wouldn't be consistent with those eligible expenses. So.
And then the other question being, speaking with Mr. Green, the idea that we present this concept, but this concept does not, as approved by council, does not provide any kind of overruling of the planning commission or any of the zoning or any of the use of that land, correct?
That's correct. And just to go back to the opinion that I gave earlier, I want to make clear that the purchase agreement is still enforceable. That's still there, and this doesn't affect that. It doesn't cause your planning commission to have to make any certain decisions. My point there was just that if this was a good time to go back and do a check of kind of where the progress is, because if it was completely contrary, if the direction was completely contrary in the plan versus what you had in your expectations, this would be the time to raise it. But I think City Manager O'Toole did a smart strategy here. I think the 50%, linking the two basically is a unique way and a creative way to make sure that those punch list items still happen. So, it sounds like from Mr. Green that there may be some vague areas of interpretation, but in general, it seems to be on the same track.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I agree with the proposal moving forward on phase 3, getting that developed, because I think that would be additional property. My biggest concern is that there's some suggested possible uses that do not currently, nor will they comply with what future uses and potential uses of that property would be. So knowing the understanding that all still has to face planning and city review, right, that's helpful. In terms of the clawback, I shouldn't say it that way, but the look back, there have been a lot of issues with the construction on this property. I don't deny that the project is coming forward and issues, but there were a number of concerns and issues in terms of sewer connections, road damage, process, all those items and everything. So when we talk about continued, look back in terms of what are we going to provide and so forth, I am concerned from those costs and delays that were affecting the city. We went from a $500,000 purchase price down to $300,000 plus allowing a loan using, or not a loan, but using our city assessment of power. And then we also converted this property into a PUD, which we hadn't done. So we've done quite a bit of negotiating and changing on this property to make this a successful approach. So when we look at the look back, I believe the mayor had proposed 50,000, and so I kind of would like to understand what that currently is, or what Ms. O'Toole believes now that we're talking this 50% and whatever else, and just kind of get an idea of that. But that's just my 2 cents at this point.
Very good. Well, maybe I can defer now to City Manager O'Toole, because she and I briefly discussed this matter earlier today, and I brought up again the notion of splitting that 100,000 plus amount in half. But I actually, upon proper reflection, I like what she and legal counsel are proposing with the benchmarks and the conditions. That's something that I can be supportive of. But Ms. O'Toole, you're the one who did the work on this, not me. Do you want to elaborate and perhaps address Mr. Gearbaugh's concerns and talk about the genesis as to why you came up with the benchmarks and the conditions as opposed to cutting the amount in half?
Certainly. The reason that we approached it from this direction is simply that the developers have already gone through the process with Nathan and his team, the Brownfield Authority, to really drill down on eligible expenses. It's not, frankly, within our wheelhouse or our area of expertise to make judgment calls on what is an eligible expense for brownfield activities. We rely on the County Brownfield Authority to do that. I trust their judgment that they've come to the correct conclusion. Instead, what we're trying to do from the city's perspective is really prevent us from having to face any liability issues related to, say, the condition of the development as it's currently prepared, or having a stagnant parcel sit undeveloped. That's a issue that's been presented multiple times in my short tenure here, and so that's really what these two specific conditions aim at addressing. One, making sure that when we receive this development and we take on responsibility for the roadway, that it meets our standards. And two, that there's a sufficient enough incentive for the developer to move forward and make progress on the next phase of the development.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that helps. I'm just, from our perspective, is making sure that, we feel that we have the authority with this to make sure that not only does phase 1 and 2 finish, but phase 3, again, whatever's done with that property, considering the potential of that it could be sold or changed, that we have the ability to still control the destiny of all that property. So I think that answered our question. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. City Manager O'Toole, can I put you on the spot one more time? Because I left my notes in my office. But when you and I chatted earlier today, the subsequent motion, right now, in just a moment, we're going to vote on the motion to acknowledge receipt. But the subsequent motion, all of that verbiage, as you and I discussed, is not necessary. I believe we can end the subsequent motion with a motion to approve resolution number, resolution to approve or not to approve, resolution number 2021-53, approving and concurring with the provisions of the Brownfield Plan for Maple Oaks and Maple Oaks North redevelopment projects. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, the language of the resolution fully stipulates the conditions. I don't believe it's necessary from the Brownfield's perspective to have that formalized in the exact motion. It's formalized in the resolution.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. If there's nothing further for staff or the petitioner or any of our guests who are on the call, I'll call for the vote. It's been properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, seconded by Councilmember Kraus, to simply acknowledge receipt of the May 31st memo. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. And I'd make a subsequent motion to approve the resolution as presented. there a second to that motion?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Does your resolution as it stands include the 50% holdback of the look back?
Yes, yes.
Okay, second.
Okay, very good. It's been properly moved by Morrow, seconded by CO. Discussion. Well, let me just add a few things. Again, 2 weeks ago or last week, whenever the hell it was we met last, I had indicated perhaps splitting that dollar amount in half. I'm still, I guess, amenable to that proposal, but I think what legal counsel and what specifically the city manager has proposed is solid and appropriate. Provides an opportunity, a path forward for the developer, not only to resolve some deficiencies that exist on phase 1 and 2, but also to move forward on phase 3. And Bill, I know I've said this to you publicly and privately. I look forward to working with you and my colleagues on the Planning Commission and in the Planning Zoning Department. We hope to receive your plan soon and work expeditiously to review it, and get the approvals that you need. I also want to acknowledge, I got an email, I think it was a week and a half ago, from one of our utility foremen, Ryan Marion at DPW, indicating that there were some deficiencies on phase 1 and phase 2. That was the genesis for a future meeting on site between DPW, the city manager, and assistant city manager, and I think that served as the inspiration for the proposal that city manager O'Toole has brought before us today. So, I believe in empowering staff. I believe in recognizing creative solutions to solve multidimensional complex problems, and that's what I think the city manager has presented to us this evening, and therefore I move the motion and we'll be voting in the affirmative. Is there additional discussion? Let's actually go through the roster. Councilmember Kraus, is there anything that you would like to add?
No, just that I appreciate what Ms. O'Toole did. I, too, was trying to think that the look back might, the 50%, we were talking about that. But that's a good plan that Colleen has made, and that gives the city still some control and assurances that it will be proceeding and things that are wrong will be fixed, et cetera, and so I like that.
Okay, excellent. Councilmember Kamara Sulak.
The only thing I would add is, just to be clear, I value what this development is providing to our community. It's serving a definite underserved need that is good for Saline and is good for society. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you adding that. Councilmember Delorco.
I'd like to say that I certainly appreciate the efforts made by City Manager O'Toole to come up with a creative solution for the holding the developer accountable for carrying the project forward with holding back portions of the monies until various aspects of those demands and projects have been completed. However, for me, it does not circumvent the overarching issue that my colleague, Councilwoman Dillon, pointed out previously, that this could potentially set a precedent for us. Having that fall on my shoulders of the political pressure felt if someone asked for similar concessions moving forward or similar treatment moving forward, I'm just not willing to put myself in that position, so I can't support the motion.
Fair enough. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you very much. I think I have elaborated my position on this, and I will unfortunately not be supporting it as far as the look-back portion.
Thank you. Councilmember Seal.
Yes, I agree with everything that you've said, Mr. Mayor, and I applaud also Ms. O'Toole for her creative approach to solving what was kind of a sticky wicket, at least for me in the past. So I do intend to support this. I don't see that throwing the baby out with the bathwater is the thing to do at this juncture.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. And last, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
Yeah, I support this. I mean, I am concerned about, we did do a lot of adjustments for this in order to get this property sold, but we also knew it was a piece of property that potentially had concerns and issues when we sold it. I am more in support of it as a result of Nathan Voigt and Washtenaw County will be auditing this and making sure what expenditures and so forth are eligible and appropriate for this type of situation, so that it's not something that's put upon necessarily the city to do that, but we also have the ability to review it and whatever else we need to in terms of concerns or whatever. At this point, I'm not going to hassle over $50,000. It's a big difference, but the fact that we're able to move forward and put another piece of property online, and that whatever 10 years from now we'll start getting the full return on it, or whatever it is sufficient. We've done this before. I mean, we've got 2 other properties, unfortunately, that weren't developed, but at least in this case, we have somewhat of a record with the developer actually getting the structures up and in place. So at least that's a positive for me to make sure that if somebody can accomplish something, they need to show it, and he showed it, so demonstrated it. So that's just my comments for tonight. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearba. And Nathan, and to your colleagues at the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, I know the applicant appreciates your help and assistance during this process, and we appreciate your time and insights as well. So thank you very much. Thanks to staff and legal counsel, and Mr. Godfrey, thank you and your colleagues for your patience.
Thank you.
We will proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Marl, seconded by Seo, to approve resolution number 2021-53. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it, and the motion carries 5-2. Thank you very much. We move on to new business item 21-54, use of Leather Bucket Alley. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the Leather Bucket Alley agreements and to approve or not to approve the request from Breck and Grill and Smokehouse 52 Barbecue for a 1-year use of the alley contingent upon building department layout approval.
Move to acknowledge and to approve.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearba to acknowledge and to approve. Are you willing to second that, Mr. Seal?
Yes, sir.
Very good. I will begin with Clerk Royal and City Manager O'Toole. Clerk Royal, would you like to begin?
Yes, both Breck and Grill and Smokehouse 52 asked to use the Leather Bucket Alley. However, Breck and Grill is willing to not use it to allow Smokehouse to have access to the street closure. So he will not be using this. So you do not need to authorize Paul or Breck and Grill to use the Leather Bucket Alley as long as the street closure is up and running.
Thank you, Clerk Royal. Before I defer to the City Manager, was that what you wanted to comment on, Mr. Gregosian? Yes, sir. Okay. Go ahead.
And then, I'm sorry.
Nope.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Terry. Finish up.
I just wanted to say Smokehouse 52 has sent in a new layout to Mr. Green, and we are reviewing that so that they can get that up and running. They need to get approval so that they can get their liquor license.
Great. Okay, thank you. Mr. Gregosian, would you care to comment?
Yes, thank you. What Mr. Royal was talking about was during the time of the street closure, for Smokehouse 52 to be able to have access to that street, they would be going through a licensed portion of the premise behind Breck and Grill. And so by discussing it with Phil a little bit about it, is that during that closure, if we were to split the leased space behind Breck and Grill north and south, and there's plenty of space for 2 at least 5-foot walk areas, one for Brecken to be able to walk out the back door to our area, and one for them to walk from their alley space of Leather Bucket Alley through the south portion of the alley to the street, would allow them to follow the guidelines of the liquor control. Now, following if the street closure reopens at the end of August or at the end of October, I would still like the opportunity to have that full space behind Breck and Grill as I had in the past, with seating, because as I had explained to Phil, if we have street seating, I think having the alley is a little too much for us, and because I do have the sidewalk, and if we relinquish or do not have street seating at that point, to get the alley reclaimed for our space, and I think the LCC would go through with that as well when they came up.
So, Mr. Gregosian, so is it appropriate then to remove Breck and Grill from this motion?
No, I would still like to lease the space.
Okay.
But 2 different layouts based on the street closure and
non-street closure.
Non-street closure.
Okay, fair enough.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to add?
No, nothing else to add. I think Clerk Royal covered it.
Okay, well, let's do a round of, we'll combine questions and discussion. I'll start again with Councilmember Kraus.
No, thank you, I'm good.
Very good. Kamara Sulak, Councilmember Kamara Sulak, any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is pretty straightforward, and I think this is some very good will by Mr. Gagosian. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councilmember Del Orco.
Nothing really to add. I appreciate that Mr. Gagosian is willing to work with his neighbor and his fellow business owner to come up with a reasonable compromise to share that space. And we're considering how we're going to handle this based on what happens and anticipating potential changes in the future. So that's the appropriate way forward.
Excellent, thank you. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I guess at this point, I'm trying to understand why we are going to renew for Brecken at this point. They've had the alley for a couple of years. I think it should be around Robin, and that Smokehouse should have it for a full year, and they can utilize it. Brecken does have 2 portions of sidewalk in addition to the street closure, whereas Smokehouse does not. And, you know, we had always said when that property was leased by Benito's at one point that we were going to share and it was going to rotate through. And Brecken has kept it because there wasn't another business that needed it or wanted it. So I would be more inclined at this point to have one agreement with Smokehouse. That being said, I want to better understand how the pass-through works with the liquor. So I need to, so last year, Smokehouse was able to walk through the Brecken tables to get to the patio.
No, I didn't have tables up there, or back there last year.
Okay.
It was just completely open at that time. And then once the street reopened vehicle traffic, we then put tables back there. Because the liquor control last year would not allow Brecken to have seating and 52 to have walk-through with it. They would allow us both to have walk-through, because my back door is right perpendicular to that alley, that they would allow us to have walk-through with a designated divider. This is Brecken's walk-through, this is 52's walk-through. 52 wouldn't be able to have tables directly behind our building in either case, because that is too close to our licensed premise and our back door.
So, I'm sorry. So I guess I'm just trying to understand.
For 52 to get approval for their license in the street, which is imperative.
Right, so they need to have access to.
They need to be able to have a walkthrough with that. So we would have a designated walkthrough of 52 and a designated walkthrough of Brecken. Not blocking the east or west ends at all, but having a divider north and south that shows this is where, if he has a staff member walking with alcohol, they could not walk through our area to get to their area.
So then how is it that in the street you can all be touching and that's not impeding on your liquor?
Because there's barriers between those. There were designated clear barriers between all.
Okay, so then if you were to put a chain that went from your back door to the sidewalk so that you had a little carve out right there.
Yep.
Then you would still be able to do your thing and he would still be able to utilize the entire alley.
From my back door west for seating and from my back door east to the street for walking.
Okay.
Excuse me, Janet.
Yes.
The problem with that is there's not a lot of room in behind the Smokehouse 52 because of the stairs. That's why he hasn't had tables in the alley previously. And he's just looking for a walkway, from what I understand, to get to the street for his alcohol use.
So I guess I would ask Barbecue 52 if they have an interest in utilizing seating in Leather Bucket Alley.
I do, just directly behind my building though, not behind Paul's building. I will only need that for access to the road.
Okay. So then how do we divide that portion, Ms. Royal? I mean, it's one property. How do you delineate that? Is it go by property lines?
What we've done before is to take the alley and divide it into either halves or thirds. I mean, Benito's used it for, I think it was Benito's. There was a pizza place, and they had used a portion of it at one point too. And so we had split it between Brecken and Benito's and, what was the other shop that was down there? Mancino's? Mangiamo's. Look at me go. Anyway, so there's no right or wrong way of doing this. It's just who has requested it. And this is the first time in several years that we've had more than one person who's requested it.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I just, my concern is that we're being fair and equitable to all of the businesses.
Hopefully by August, all this COVID will be over and everybody will be opened up to 100% and we won't have to worry about it.
Amen.
Okay, I'll stop there, Mayor.
Mr. CO, any questions?
If Mr. Tolliver and Gargosian can live with each other, I can live with it.
Good, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
Yeah, I just want to thank Paul for being able to share this space with Smokehouse 52. I think it's a great idea. But one question, could Smokehouse 52 also utilize some of the space of Leather Bucket Alley behind, if they wanted to have seating, behind 109?
No, because there's deliveries that go into the bakery.
That's one over. He's referring to 109, the Culture Exchange.
Not the bakery.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think it's according to where the stairs is. That's the only thing that I know of is the stairs are a problem. Okay.
I was just going to say if they wanted to reach out to Holly, maybe they can get some more additional space instead of just right behind the stairs. Other than that, nope, I am glad you could work it out. And I know that Colleen can address any concerns or issues, or if she delegates it to Assistant Manager Green, they can resolve the problems with it. Looking forward to another year of their use.
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right, we will proceed now to a vote. It's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to our last action item of the evening, which is new business item 21-55, Saline Operational Assistance Amendment. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the March 31st, 2021 memo from City Manager O'Toole and to approve or not to approve the Operational Assistance Amendment with Tetra Tech in an amount not to exceed $30,000.
So moved.
Acknowledge and approve.
That was moved by Commander Sulak, seconded by Kraus. Thank you both. City Manager O'Toole, do you care to make a brief comment?
I'll just simply state that, over the last 6 to 7 weeks, we've leaned heavily on our partners at Tetra Tech to help meet the operational demands of the plant and to start planning for more regular and minor maintenance items that really need to occur and need to be addressed. We've been very pleased with that relationship, and due to the nature and number of maintenance items that we have identified, which can certainly specifically be referenced in the wastewater treatment plant ad hoc committee report from last month and in future reports. We would like to expand on those services and also more formally incorporate activities at the water treatment plant into that relationship.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We'll do a quick round of questions, and you may also share some comments if you'd like. I'll begin with Councilmember Kraus.
No, thank you. I'm good.
Councilmember Kamara Sulak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is pretty straightforward and makes sense, so I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Del Orco.
No questions, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Dillon.
Just very quickly, the dollar amount, is that based on actual, is it hours? Is it just an estimate, just not to exceed? And how long do you think that will last?
It is a not to exceed amount. It's based on hourly rates, which we have a standard rate sheet. If you remember from when we did the engineering approvals, the pre-qualified engineering approvals. So it's those same rates. There's not new rates for this plan. I'm not sure if Brian Rubel is still on the call. He might be able to give you a better response in terms of general estimate. But I mean, for context, we've been working with Tetra Tech in this same capacity for about 7 weeks, and we spent $6,000 of the original budget. So that gives you a little bit of context of how far those dollars are going over time. Brian,
Yep, Ms. O'Toole, I believe Mr. Rubel is present. Brian, do you care to briefly comment to Councilmember Dillon's question?
Yes. By way of statistics, I've been very impressed with Mr. Fetchick's ambition to get some things completed. We've completed together 11 items. We have 27 on our to-do list right now, and he's adding to it every week. Unfortunately, I think the next few weeks, we're going to have to bite off some larger projects than we did the first 7 weeks. We're going to take some bids on some work at the water plant and need to oversee some work that some contractors are submitting prices on. So I think we'll go through May, but at the magnitude of the list we have, I would think by June we might be well through that budget.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else, Councilmember Dillon?
No, that was it. I was just wondering if we were going to get through the budget year.
Very good. I believe I'm up to Mr. Seal.
Yes, Your Honor.
Nothing? Okay.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearba, any questions or comments?
Just comment, our wastewater treatment task force fully supports this. We do know that this additional help has immensely provided insight and ability for Mr. Fetchit to identify things and Mr. Rubel to move forward on, individual repairs and things that have not been identified in the past. And this is very helpful to have another set of eyes looking at everything.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearba. If there's nothing further, we do have a motion on the floor moved by Camara Sulak, seconded by Councilmember Kraus to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We transition now to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is Commission, Committee, and Task Force reports from council members. Councilmember Kraus.
Thank you. Very excited to announce that we did have our first healthcare task force meeting last week, and although it's a large ask and a large mission, we have some really good community members. We will be opening it up to subcommittee applications soon. But it was really exciting to get that kicked off. We need some new healthcare options in Saline, so that's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your work on that important and timely task force. Councilmember Camara Sulak, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The DEI task force continues to work and put together short-term, mid-term, and long-term planning. We will, as you know, Mr. Mayor, we will be reporting to council here in a few weeks. And as another reminder, anybody that hasn't submitted their recipes, I encourage you to follow Chief Hart's recipe submissions. I believe it's multiple. I even heard rumor that one is for non-humans, probably a dog. So, we're really are being diverse, equitable and inclusive to humans and non-human recipes. So please, as public servants, as role models and leaders to the community, I implore you to follow Chief Hart's example. Other than that, I will yield the floor to Mr. Delorco.
Very good. Mr. Delorco, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yes, I met on all three committees with the healthcare, which Councilwoman Kraus just referenced. It's going to be a broad initiative moving forward, and there's going to be a lot of work to do there, and they wrote me into being vice chair of that committee, so we'll see how that... Also, Environmental Commission did meet on St. Patrick's Day of all days. We're making plans to put together a mission statement to reflect the bylaws and then have a brief annual presentation before council in the near future. So we're mapping out who's going to be responsible for putting together the presentation and delivering that. Also, in code review, we discussed the consideration in adopting a responsible contractors ordinance for the city of Saline, which helps streamline processes for bidding moving forward and leveling the playing field and hopefully improving the quality of contractors that receive as we contract with contractors moving forward, particularly with respect to the broad initiatives in the capital improvement plan with both infrastructure upgrades and the wastewater treatment plant. So be looking for more information on that in the future. We'll be considering that at our next code review task force meeting, and we'll also be bringing that to council forward based on their recommendation.
Thank you. Yes, and if the Code Review Task Force votes the responsible contracting ordinance out at your next meeting, I would assume it will be on a council agenda sometime in May.
Correct.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Delarico. Councilwoman Dillon, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
No, our committees meet later in the month, so at the next meeting I'll report out.
Very good. Mr. CO, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
The Chiefs Strategic Planning Committee met this last week, and we had a very good meeting. I think we moved forward with some good comments and a lot of good information. It was a smaller group this week, so I think that the people felt more inclined to speak up and contribute. So it was a well conducted, well attended meeting. Also, I am on the Health Committee Task Force. That was a good meeting. I agree with my colleagues. I look forward to the progress we're going to make in the future, trying to bring some kind of health system back to the city of Saline.
Very good. Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Just a couple. We had our inaugural meeting, or the reinstatement of our meeting of the Rec Center Task Force, and we met with Ms. Scruggs and Ms. Lambert to take a tour of the facility, to review some of the work that they've done during the COVID shutdown, which repainting and seeing how some of the equipment and things and everything are laid out, and looking forward to moving ahead. Our meetings are going to be every Thursday, or every other Thursday.
Every other Thursday, twice a month.
Yep.
We meet again this Thursday.
And then wastewater treatment plant, I'll let Ms. O'Toole mention that. We had a good understanding. I was able to go visit it and get a better understanding of a couple little issues and things that are going on at the plant. And then I'll let her update you all on the process of some of the things we've just recently closed out and cleaned.
Very good. City Manager O'Toole, as the chair of the Wastewater Treatment Ad Hoc Committee, would you like to report out?
Certainly. So we did host a tour of the site. Unfortunately, we couldn't get all committee members available at the same time, but on that walkthrough was member Gearbaugh and also Brian Rubel from Tetra Tech. We noted some odor control issues related to the sludge storage tank that staff is already working towards a solution on. And, we believe will provide some degree of immediate relief for that specific issue. We've also completed work now on the digester electrical issue repairs and related to the electrical issues on the bioscrubber. We've also scheduled a site visit from the company that installed the bioscrubber unit initially, to confirm that the organisms within the bioscrubber are acclimated, and if need be, to develop a strategy to reacclimate those and to ensure that the unit is operating as designed. Our next report will be, our next formal report will be shared at the April 19th meeting.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I do not have anything further to add on the commission, committee, or task force front. Let's transition now to reports or other announcements. Councilmember Kraus, do you have any?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, do you have any reports or announcements?
I do not have any, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Delarico?
I have none.
Councilmember Dillon?
Nothing to report.
Mr. CO?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
None at this time.
Easy enough. Then we will transition to the second and last public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. We'll begin with those in the audience.
Mary Hess. I would like clarification on the bucket alley. About 2 or 3 years ago, I had parked in the handicap parking by Benny's Bakery and was going through the alley to hear the music downtown. And Mr. Paul from Brecken Grill told me I was not allowed to go through there. It's private property. Needless to say, I stated it was public property, and we had a conversation after that. But I would like to know, is it still public property to walk through?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. It's public property. The public can navigate through Leather Bucket Alley at any time. Thank you for that comment or question, rather. Anything else from the audience? Nothing from the audience. Clerk Royal, any additional comments received via email tonight?
No, sir.
Excellent. Then please note our upcoming meetings, including 2 work meetings on the budget, beginning at 6 p.m. on the 19th and then again on the 3rd. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, concerns about the budget, please direct those inquiries to the city manager's office. If there's nothing further to be brought before city council this evening, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 10:21.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Dillon, seconded by Kamara Sulak. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.